Hey everyone, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for helping me reach 100 subscribers. I honestly couldn't have done this without your love, support, and constant encouragement. Every like, comment, and subscribe means a lot to me. Now let's keep this journey going. Our next target is 200 subscribers, and I know we can do it together. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's grow as a family. Thank you once again. When Luffy vanishes inside ancient ruins, the Straw Hats are pulled into a terrifying journey through his past. Trapped within Luffy's memories, the crew witnesses moments of brotherhood with Ace and Sabo, childhood pain, and scars Luffy never shared. As past and present blur, the Straw Hats must confront truths that were never meant for them to see, learning what truly shaped their captain. To escape, they must not only find Luffy, but also come to terms with the weight of the memories he carried alone. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Warm Memories and Brotherly Bonds by RoseDragonWitch. Respect to author.
Chapter 30. Welcome to the City of Water, Water 7. The entire crew sat around each other without saying a word, no one knowing just what they could say at this point. The entire crew needed each other to survive, they all knew that, but it was horrifying to think of how easily they forgot that. And now each one of them was lost in their own dark thoughts to what they had just watched. Chopper was wiping his eyes on his arm. He remembered how he had stayed at Luffy's side for those next few days as he was recovering on the Mary. They were lucky that the weather decided to take pity on them and remained calm so that the journey wouldn't have been so hard on Luffy. After they left the island, he practically had to throw the others out of the room so that he could work on Luffy's injuries without distraction. As he treated the wounds more carefully and properly over those days, making sure that they healed and didn't get infected, he remembered feeling so scared over whatever hurt Luffy so badly. Luckily, even though Luffy suffered a lot of internal bleeding, none of his organs had been punctured, and he was a fast healer, up in just several days and ready to go exploring again. But after seeing what had truly caused those wounds, what did such damage to his captain, he wished that he never saw it. He sniffled miserably as he thought about it, how despite being so badly hurt, Luffy continued to try and fight with all those arrows still in him. A normal person would have died instantly. And even if they didn't die, they'd be bedridden for weeks. He got hurt for them, for trying to save them, because they were all tricked by the Baron. He sat down and wrapped his arms around his knees, remembering the reason he joined the Straw Hats in the first place, because he admired Luffy. After seeing this, it only reinforced his decision. That was why he was going to work harder than ever before. Starting right now, he was going to be strong enough to be able to protect Luffy for once. He wasn't going to let what happened on that stupid island happen again if he could help it. No matter where Luffy went from here on out, he'd be right there behind him. Sanji was feeling sick with himself. He still couldn't believe some of the hateful things he had said to Luffy and the others while on that damn island. He'd been angry before, but so angry that he would refuse someone food. Forget acting like an asshole in that cooking contest, forget how he had degraded himself to playing with food, he had refused his crewmates a meal. He could still clearly remember how hard it had been those hellish weeks on that damn rock when he was a child. He was so hungry that he was in pain, his stomach had been in constant pain and he was longing to eat. He could never forget that, hadn't he always sworn that he would never refuse someone a meal if he had the means to feed them. He may think that Luffy was an idiot, and he may want to gut Moss Head most days, but that didn't mean he ever wanted to let them starve or say such hurtful things. He knew that Luffy wasn't to blame for anything that happened on that island, so why did he get so angry that he'd come out and yell that it was all his fault? He felt sick with himself, he wanted to go and beat himself black and blue just to teach him a lesson. He took several calming puffs on the cigarette before he vowed never to break his oath again. He knew that refusing food to someone would have made Chief Zeph sick with disappointment if he had seen it. Well, Sanji may have broken his vow once, but never again. No matter how angry he was, he would never deny anyone food again. He glanced at Zoro, knowing that he should apologize, but saying it in front of everyone made him want to pull his tongue out of his head. He'll make up for the meal he denied him by giving him an extra serving at their next mealtime. Maybe it was immature, but it was closest that he could bring himself to apologize. As for Luffy, however, he would have to apologize to him face to face, to let him know that he didn't mean a word of what he said. Nami was feeling cold inside as she tried to shift her thoughts around. She shared a smile with Usopp, silently letting each other know that they forgave each other for what happened and no longer blamed them for what happened, and that was one less thing to worry about. But she still couldn't believe how simple it was for the Baron and his stupid crew to turn them against each other. Just how was he able to do that? All the adventures they went on together, all the battles they fought side by side, how could a few stupid games almost end up destroying their trust in each other? She clasped her hands out in front of her and quietly prayed that wherever Luffy was right now that he was alright and they'd find him soon. As soon as they did find him, they were leaving this place behind and not looking back. Usopp was sitting there poking at the dirt with a crooked stick he found. What he said to Nami that day was low, he was just so angry at her it slipped out. He still couldn't believe that he said it, and how pathetic was it that he was taken out by some guy with a turtle shell. He still didn't remember too much of what happened after he ran into him on the edge of the forest, but his hatred for the Baron was strong. How could anyone be as evil as that? To hurt other crews so that they all suffer what he felt. What did they ever do to him? Just because he couldn't protect his friends didn't mean that he had to go and do all this. Remembering seeing how they were slowly being digested by that plant sent chills up his spine. Luffy, what were you thinking going in there alone? Why did you practically kill yourself for us? Not that he wasn't grateful for what his captain did for them, but the thought of how far Luffy was willing to go for them made him sick with himself at how stubborn he had been when they fought over the Mary. He fought the tears as he remembered those hurtful words he had said. What was the matter with him? He glanced at Sanji and suddenly had a good idea to how he must be feeling right now. Robin never had someone to be able to trust with her life in their hands. Not since Saul. She had always known things like loyalty and friendship existed in the world, but she hadn't been able to experience that herself for 20 years. She had been forced to run away from countless families and organizations. She had become a criminal. She knew where she stood with other criminals. They distrusted and feared her, and she was glad of it. It kept her from growing attached to them. But there was so much strength and emotion in Luffy's words whenever he fought. He believed in what he said and did. It wasn't until after a while did she realize why Luffy does what he does. He didn't need a reason, they were his friends and that was all he needed to know. She smiled. She knew that he was a fool, but then again, so was she. They were both the kind of people to want to believe in hopeless causes. He had helped save the East Blue, fought warlords, brought an end to a civil war, and risked his life countless times merely for the sake of protecting his friends. He refused to give up because losing wasn't an option to him. And it was here that he was at his most dangerous. He could go against all logic and common sense before he won. And after seeing how far he went for her and the others in that last memory only proved it, despite how hard she tried, she had come to care about each member of the crew. Without her ever realizing it, they snuck into her heart and were now there to stay. Brook was just amazed. There was no other words he could think of right now. When he first met this crew at Thriller Bark, after seeing how well they fought together, and especially after seeing Zoro willing to exchange his life for Luffy's, he didn't think he had ever seen a crew with such strong bonds. But in these last memories, they had been practically ready to mutiny against each other. But at the end, they continued to cheer on Luffy whether they were aware of it or not. Though he knew that he shouldn't bother, his non-existing heart went out to the Baron for all that he had to suffer through. He ended up losing his entire crew and he knew better than most what that was like. And as for Brook, it hurt him so badly to think that their Straw Hat captain, the one that he had grown to admire so much, had to suffer through that even if it was for a short time. Frankie was working on drinking his last bottle of spare cola. Usually, seeing him with a drink was enough to drive everyone crazy since they were all tired and hungry. But they were also lost in their own heads, they didn't pay any attention. As was he, and though he should hate the Baron, he could also understand where the bastard was coming from. He, too, understood what it was like to blame yourself for the death of someone close to you. Even though he was able to accept his own mistakes and forgive himself for Tom's death, he always wished that he could somehow find a way to stop it from happening. He knew that he couldn't, so he decided to do what he could to protect the city that Tom had loved so much. He made a name for himself. He took his brothers and sisters in, and though the ache inside him hadn't fully healed, the loneliness inside him had been filled. But why did the Baron feel that making fake crewmates and killing others was honoring their memory? The guy had to be insane to have gone down that road. He sighed as he drained his bottle of cola, suddenly feeling a little homesick. As for Zoro, he just leaned up against a large boulder, staring up at the sky. Though he could understand why Luffy never told them what happened, he couldn't help but feel angry at this. What he hated the most was that Luffy clearly seemed ready to die along with them. How could he think of doing something so stupid? What did he think his death would solve? This entire crew of misfits were all people who were used to being alone and protecting just themselves. And now they knew things about their captain that he never wanted them to know. Though they answered plenty of questions, they had now seen how far he was willing to go for them. He felt nothing but shame inside him at the thought of just running out on the crew like that. It was everyone's job to protect the others, but he shook his head at that.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
Why hasn't he ever told us anything? Nami asked finally, her voice sounding faint and lonely. Why haven't we tried harder to try and talk to him about it? We didn't think that it was anything to worry about anymore, Zoro stated dully. We were all alive and Luffy recovered, so there wasn't any point to ask him. Also, after that, we ended up reaching Water 7, so there wasn't much time to really think about it anymore, remember? But I don't like this. Usopp yelled out angrily. He's not really the type of person to talk about his past, Robin answered knowingly. We all are like that. He doesn't ask us about our pasts, and we don't ask him about his. But if he was keeping something like this secret, what else do you think he's keeping from us? Sanji demanded hotly. I mean, like what happened at Marineford and all that. So you really think we'll see that? Chopper asked quickly, his voice sounding small and scared at the thought. If we keep following through his memories, it's only going to be a matter of time till we reach that, Frankie pointed out grimly. Maybe if we hurry and catch that stupid memory monster, and get bro back before those memories, then I don't think we need to worry. But we're really starting to catch up to that moment now, aren't we? I mean, after this should be Water 7, right? Then Ennie's lobby, followed by Thriller Bark. And I'll finally enter the picture by that point. Brook nodded. A part of him couldn't wait to see when he finally joins the crew, and after that is everything that happened at Sabayati. I'm not looking forward to that, Nami whispered grimly. That day was one of the worst days of my life. It was also the last time we saw each other for 2 years. And Luffy never did tell us exactly what happened after that, Sanji added angrily. I don't want to see that. Chopper cried out at once. I mean, I'm scared of what Luffy's been keeping secret about that. I think we all are, Nami agreed sadly. After all, Ace was. She trailed off, unable to think of anything else to say, but they didn't need her to. Luffy, though the most open out of all the crew, he was just as secretive of his past as they all were about their own. It was strange that they never really noticed how much they took their bonds for granted. You think we should talk to him about Omatsuri and Marineford once we get him back? Brook asked nervously. I know I wasn't there, and it's not my place to say, but I think that maybe. Ask him. Nami finished for him as she thought that over. Yes, Robin said softly, her hands folded in her lap, but how we're gonna do that is the question. I'm sure that we might be able to talk to him about what happened with the Baron since our memories are back and he can't pretend nothing happened there. But what happened to him during the war? I don't think he'll be so willing to talk about that. Why? Chopper asked inquisitively. Because it has nothing to do with us, Zoro answered bitterly, and they all glanced at him. I don't know what he had to go through after we were all separated, but whatever happened to him, we weren't there. He had to fight that battle on his own, without any help from us. What happened on the island with the Baron? We were there so he might feel like he has to explain to us about that, especially since we remember everything. But the war, it's had to do something to him, Brook said miserably. For his brother to die right in front of him. That's gotta mess with your head, Usopp said softly, still unable to believe that he never thought to ask him about it. I'd be amazed if it didn't, Robin said knowingly. He had gone through a war and lost his brother. We don't know any more than that. But if I had to guess, it probably did a devastating amount of damage to his mind to go through something like that. What happened to him after all that is anyone's guess. But 2 years is a long time. Whether or not he was able to come to terms with the pain and guilt, as I'm sure that he must have been feeling, I cannot say. Which is all the more reason he should talk to us about it. Nami said. Don't bother, Zoro said, and she glared fiercely at him, demanding to know why not, asking how he can act like everything's alright, and how he, of all people, could care so little about Luffy. I never said I didn't care. He snapped back angrily, and she blinked startled as he added, what I'm trying to say is, how can we judge him when we're all the same way? We all have dark moments in our pasts that we don't want to talk about, don't we? Don't we all have memories we rather forget? His words struck a chord and they were unable to think of anything to say to that, with Nami was feeling guilty at her outburst. Out of all of them, Zoro was the most loyal to Luffy, so of course it would bother him to know that they couldn't have helped him, didn't even know what happened, until they had to hear about the war secondhand. But before they could come to a real decision, the memories were back and it was a bit of a surprise for all of them. They were standing on the shore of a grassy island, but the way in front of them was completely frozen and seemed to stretch on for miles. Even the form of a giant sea monster was frozen solid like an ice sculpture. Goodness, where are we? Brook gasped in amazement, staring at the ice in amazement. I don't think that I've seen this much ice since. Aokiji, Robin said, suddenly growing pale at the thought. Who? Frankie asked her. Former Admiral Aokiji, Nami answered at once. Remember, the guy who helped us to find Z. This was the island where we ran into him for the first time. I see, Brook said in wonder. I thought I'd seen ice like this before when Z chose his place to die. But why was he here? He wasn't here to arrest you or anything, was he? Hard to say what goes on inside that man's head, Robin answered softly. Maybe we just happened to run into him, but I personally doubt it. Didn't he say that he was curious? Chopper asked suddenly. I mean, he didn't seem like he really wanted to kill us or anything. Not at first, Sanji hissed darkly, thinking of how that bastard had frozen Robin. Okay, I'm not sure I want to see this, Usopp gulped. We were no match for him. Yeah, but that was back then, Zoro said, his hand on his swords again. I bet that we can take him out now. Then or now isn't the point. Nami yelled, "It's not like when we fought those pirates at Fishman Island. An admiral isn't going to go down without a fight. Remember when Luffy fought Z? He was a formal admiral, right? That fight was way too close to comfort if you ask me. We should just be glad that it was Aokiji," Robin answered as she walked forward a little bit and she spotted their memory selves all there. Out of the 3 admirals 2 years ago, he was by far the most lenient. Kizaru sure didn't show us any mercy, Frankie nodded, thinking back to that fight with a sour taste in his mouth. And I heard that Akainu is supposed to be merciless, Robin nodded. I suppose, in a way, we got off lucky. She glanced up the hill where she could spot the familiar form of one of the men that had haunted her nightmares for years. She looked away, trying hard not to remember that awful day that changed her life forever. Instead, she focused on the memory Straw Hats, who were saying goodbye to a group of people. Though they all looked a bit worn and tired, they were smiling and there was a light shining in their eyes as they wrapped themselves up in blankets, and had a large sled of food with them. "All right then," the man in front said, "time for us to get going." "Right," Luffy said, "I'm really happy for you guys. What is all this?" Brook asked curiously as Memory Nami was telling them to take care. They were a group of people who had been shipwrecked and washed up on this island. Nami answered him, "We helped them out and Aokiji was the one who created this ice path to a nearby island where they would get help." "Really? I didn't think he seemed like a bad guy when we met him," Brook said happily. "Like I said," Robin answered softly, the form of Saul's laughing face being frozen came to her mind's eye. "He is a difficult man to figure out. I'm not even sure if he knows whose side he's on." "What do you?" Chopper began, but then the people were talking again. They said that they now knew that there were different kinds of pirates and thanked them wholeheartedly for them treating their sick and injured, as well as for sharing their food with them. The Straw Hats all blushed and told them not to think about it, and they gave them some last words of advice, like to keep the children bundled up in the ice should kept their food fresh longer so they shouldn't have to worry. The castaways smiled and waved goodbye as they walked off, and they kept waving until they were out of their sights. "Sounds like a happy ending," Frankie laughed. "Though it's nice to know that there are some people in the world who don't think that all pirates are evil," Usopp said grinning. "That really felt good helping them out like that. Yeah, if we had tried to take them with us on the Mary, they might have gotten in trouble with sailing with a bunch of pirates." Nami nodded as their memory selves were heading back to the shore when they noticed how cold it really was. "Hey, check it out," Memory Chopper called happily, and he was skating around on the ice. "I can skate." The current one laughed. It had been a really long time since he'd seen snow, and he was missing it. "That looks like so much fun." "Yo-ho-ho-ho," Brook said happily. "Awesome moves there, Chopper," Frankie added, and Chopper blushed as Luffy and Memory Usopp were cheering and clapping at some of Chopper's tricks. It was fun to watch them enjoy themselves on the ice for a few long minutes before they couldn't take the cold anymore and went up the hill where they could get warm. As they followed them, they spotted him sitting there on the ground, cross-legged, and his head bent to one side as if he was trying to figure out a hard problem. Though he was sitting down, they all knew that if he's standing up he'd be taller than even Brook. He had black, curly hair cut to chin length and fanned out at the tips. His skin was tanned and he was dressed like any other Marine, only with a blue sleeping mask on his forehead. He looked completely unlike the man they ran into not long ago. The scars that they knew him to have one day, as well as part of his missing leg, weren't there. "So this is the Aokiji you guys met, huh?" Frankie asked. "He looks different than when we met him." "Yes, he looks younger here," Brook committed. "Though I know that 2 years have passed, he looked like he aged a lot more than that. He quit the Marines after Akainu took over," Zoro reminded them, "and he's pretty much been a wanderer ever since. At least that's what Jinbei said to us. The battle he had with Akainu really took a toll on him," Usopp said softly. "Makes me wonder how Akainu made it out." "I doubt that he made it out unscathed," Zoro said. "Jinbei did say that they fought each other for 10 days, Nami frowned, "and by the end of it, Aokiji couldn't even stand." "That must have been some battle," Usopp gulped at the thought. Luffy, who was still enjoying himself, finally noticed that Aokiji was giving him a strange look and stopped laughing to look at him. Aokiji didn't say anything as he sighed and scratched his head, as if wondering what he should do.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
"What is it?" Luffy asked him curiously, a slight frown coming to his face. Aokiji was silent for a few more moments as he thought over what to say. "How should I put this?" he asked at last, seemingly talking more to himself than to them. "You're the spitting image of your grandpa, Monkey D." Luffy. Luffy looked startled at hearing his grandfather's name as Aokiji finished, or maybe I should say. "You're just as reckless and hard to figure out. You know, I do see a family resemblance there." Robin nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "Hopefully Luffy won't turn out to be as warped as his gramps when he's older," Nami sighed. But at those words, Luffy froze as a look of anxiety washed over his face and he began to sweat. "You knew, my grandpa." He choked out, and they all knew that he must be reliving all of his grandpa's training sessions over in his mind. "Poor guy," Frankie whispered with a wince. "That's rough." It hurts just thinking about it. Usopp shivered as Chopper gulped at the memory of seeing how cold Garp was when he just threw Luffy down that pit. Memory. Usopp looked astonished at hearing Aokiji mention Luffy's grandfather. Seriously? He asked. Luffy's. He looked to Luffy, as if about to ask him something before he noticed his face and they could all see how edgy he looked. Hey, Luffy, what's wrong? You're sweating. I don't think I'd ever seen him look like that. Usopp frowned as he watched. Not that I blame him, Garp scares me too. He seemed to have snapped himself out of the past and looked at Usopp, saying a little too quickly as he waved his hands in front of him like he was trying to stop someone from running into him. Nothing. Really, I'm fine. Should have known right then and there that something was wrong, Sanji stated. Your grandfather helped me out once, a long time ago, Aokiji went on as if they hadn't said anything. That's why I'm here. I wanted to see you and Nico Robin together with my own eyes. Why? Brook asked curiously, looking from Luffy, to Memory Robin, to the Robin standing beside him. Why did he? The current Robin just shook her head, letting him know that she didn't want to talk about it just then. Her past self looked fearful, standing farther back than the others, as if torn between staying and running. You look like you're gonna be sick here, sis, Frankie pointed out. I've seen what he's capable of, she said, rather stiffly. And, she couldn't go on. This was the first time that she had encountered Aokiji since he helped her to escape the destruction of Ohara. But she remembered what he said to her that day very clearly. He had said that he wasn't her friend or ally, and that he would be the first one to hunt her down if she became a problem. The only reason he had chosen to let her live in the first place was because it was Saul's last wish. She just didn't know who he was or what he was trying to do. But she also briefly thought about what he said after their brief encounter after everyone saved her from Eni's lobby. Ohara still lives. As she tried to work out her thoughts, Aokiji spoke again. On second thought, maybe, I should just kill you. He sure doesn't beat around the bush, does he? Nami asked darkly as Brook gasped. He didn't really mean that, did he? He asked them hurriedly. This didn't seem like the same man who helped them out before. Well, he could have if he truly wanted to, Zoro answered, gritting his teeth, but, we sure didn't leave this place without some bad memories. But how'd he come up with this kind of reasoning? Frankie asked. Before, they were working together to help out those castaways, and here he was talking about killing them. The Marines just didn't seem right in the head if you ask him. The government still doesn't consider you a threat, but I know enough of your history to see you are a formidable crew, Aokiji stated calmly, looking at them all with polite curiosity. But his eyes lingered on Robin the longest. You may be few in number, but with the shrewd Rouges gathered here, this crew will likely be a problem later on. Should we take that as a compliment or an insult? Usopp asked nervously. Either way, he's trying to figure out if it is a good idea to let us live or not, Sanji said frowning. Considering the circumstances regarding your initial bounty, the numerous daring actions you've taken, and the speed of your overall progress, Aokiji went on, before he shook his head. I've fought outlaws for most of my life, but thinking about how you'll turn out scares the hell out of me. I often wondered about that too, Nami whispered, I mean, just what will happen to all of us once we reach the end of the Grand Line. We'll worry about that when we get there, Nami Swan, Sanji said. But either way, it's none of the Marines' business. Why should they want to take us out? If you ask me, it looks like we've been doing their job for them all this time. Up till when we invaded Eni's lobby, we hardly attacked Marines, Zoro added with a shrug. Aside from the occasional loser who comes our way, we mostly been taking out dictators and other pirates. But once we made it clear that we were an enemy of the world government, they had their answer. We can only get stronger from this moment onwards, Sanji added as he puffed on the cigarette, feeling better than he had all night. We'll do what we want, and if the Marines have a problem with that, that's their problem. Yeah, Chopper yelled out proudly. But their memory selves weren't feeling the same way, all of them looking tense. Hey wait, hold on a second, Memory Usopp cried out, shaking his hands like how Luffy had been doing before when asked about his grandpa. You said you here just to check things out. Not to kill anyone. You don't think he was really trying to kill you although do you? Brook asked. No, Robin said softly, I think what Chopper said was right. He was just curious, but, she sighed as she thought to herself, I lost my temper. She just couldn't stand back and let him get away with saying what he did. One among you I consider the most dangerous, Aokiji stated, glancing towards Robin and added, that would be you, Nico Robin. So despite everything you were here for Robin. Luffy yelled, his eyes narrowed dangerously and he looked angry. Now I'm really gonna kick your ass. Anyone who messes with Robin, messes with all of us. The present-day Chopper cried out and Robin smiled down at him. Nice to know I can always count on you, she told him gratefully as he blushed once more, and told her to shut up and that she shouldn't think about that. But Aokiji didn't seem bothered by Luffy's words. The size of her bounty isn't merely a reflection of her strength and power, he informed them calmly, it also represents something else, that would be the level of threat and danger that she poses to the world government. That's why a 79 million bounty was placed on her head at the tender young age of 8. They blamed you for sinking a few battleships, right? Usopp asked her as she sighed. That was the story, she said grimly, but I wasn't the one who did that. The real reason they placed that bounty on my head was because I can read the poneglyphs. They had hoped that high bounty would be enough for bounty hunters to bring me in. Robin-san, Brooke said gently, placing a bony hand on her shoulder in a comforting way. I can't begin to imagine how difficult it was for you. He remembered, as if from another life, not long after he had joined the Straw Hats and he had felt unworthy to be with them. After reading their logbook, and learning about all the amazing and incredible things they had done since coming to the Grand Line, he had been afraid that he might end up holding them back. And the thought of having to live alone, to be without them, scared him more than any zombie on Thriller Bark. It had been Robin who helped to ease that fear by telling him that she too had once been that insecure about being forced to leave the crew. He didn't truly understand at the time, but now he thought he was beginning to understand. He could see that he hadn't been the only person who had been forced to live alone for years on end. She gave him a gentle smile in return, but didn't say anything. I'm impressed you were able to survive, especially as a child, Aokiji stated, now sounding like he had just read the paper and was telling them what tomorrow's weather was supposed to be like. You managed to betray, sidestep and escape from everyone in your path and then found yourself a new partner to make use of. The current Robin looked away at those words, each one bringing back bad memories of all that she was forced to do and how hard she had to run to stay alive. You survived in the underworld by being quick to switch sides and now you've chosen this crew as your next haven. Aokiji finished in memory. Robin's eyes widened in horror at his words, like he had just given her a deadly threat, though maybe in a sense, he was. How dare he judge you like that? The current Sanji snarled. He didn't know much about Robin's past, but everything she had to do, she did because she had no other choice. No one has any right to judge a lady because of her past no matter how bad it was. And his past self agreed completely. That's enough, jerk. He yelled out, no longer able to stop himself from walking forward and let him go on. I'm not just gonna let you stand there and speak to a lady like that. What kind of ridiculous grudge are you holding against Robin? Memory Usopp was holding him back, preventing him from launching himself at Aokiji, trying to get him not to do something that he would regret. He may not look tough, but an admiral isn't someone they wanted to mess with right now. I don't have anything against her, Aokiji informed them calmly. The only connection we have between us is that I let her escape from me one time, that's about it. It was a long time ago. He glanced at each one of them in turn, with that same wondering look on his face, as if trying to figure out what they were thinking. You will all learn soon enough that protecting this troublesome woman leads to nothing but regret. Robin shut her eyes at those words. That wasn't completely untrue now, was it? If you need proof, consider this, every organization that she's had something to do with in the past has been annihilated, Aokiji went on. He then stood up and walked a few steps closer. Not one solitary member escaped except for her. He looked at her. Why is that? Nico. Robin. That's not true, is it? The present-day Nami asked her at once. Not completely, Robin stated softly. I'm sure that some members have been able to escape from some of the organizations I was in, but the organization itself was always destroyed because of me. Robin, Chopper asked her sadly as the memory. Robin took a few steps back, biting her lower lip, clearly knowing what he was talking about. Seeing how afraid she was made Luffy even angrier. Shut up, jerk. The past doesn't matter. He screamed at him. Everyone was backing him up at those words, even Zoro, though he didn't say anything, his face held anger as he glared at Aokiji. That's right, Memory, Usopp yelled, pointing an accusing finger at him. If it did, we wouldn't have a dangerous former pirate hunter guy or a degenerate, conniving ex-thief woman on our crew, would we? Both Memory, Nami, and the current one gave him a hard bonk on the head, snapping at him not to go overboard. You can't say it's not true. Usopp whimpered as he rubbed the spot on his head where she hit him. Maybe, but you don't have to bring it up. She shouted. Memory Sanji then added, we are now more important than who we were. Of course, the current one nodded. We've all done things in our pasts that we aren't proud of. He shut his eyes and thought of those damn words he said on Omatsuri Island. But, that's in the past, we should try to remember that we can't change it and to just move on. Robin glanced at him sadly. You make it sound so easy, she said. I never said it was, Sanji informed her. But that's all we can do about it, right? Yeah, that's right. Robin is our friend. Memory Chopper yelled out, now waving his arms around angrily, and no longer showing any fear at Aokiji. Don't you dare say anything bad about her. You hear me? Though the Memory Robin looked too stunned to be able to say anything to their words, the present-day one was smiling peacefully. Hearing those words felt as if someone was wrapping a warm blanket around her. Even though she was terrified of Aokiji, those words alone made her so happy. I see, Aokiji said, looking a little disappointed as he turned back to Robin. So these poor fools don't suspect a thing. Something inside the Memory Robin seemed to have snapped. Just get to the point. She screamed out, her hands held up. If you want to arrest me, then why don't you just do it already? They could all count on one hand how many times that Robin had lost control of her emotions, but here the fear was replaced with pure anger. For the first time since viewing these memories, she looked truly angry. And despite Usopp screaming at her not to do it, she caused about 30 hands to appear and grab hold of Aokiji from all over. My, Aokiji said indifferently, his eyes looking at her shaking arms. Did something I say strike a nerve? That's too bad, guess I must have overestimated how reasonable a woman you were. And clutch, she screamed, thus breaking him right in half and his body shattered like glass. Damn girl, Frankie gulped. If I ever said anything that ticked you off, I'm sorry. It's not like you to lose your cool, Robin-san, Brook said in astonishment as the memory Straw Hat screamed and began to freak out. He just made me angry, Robin stated shamefully. She knew this wasn't like her, she knew that he was manipulating her emotions and making her lose focus, but she just couldn't help it. Not that her attack did any good. Aokiji was reforming from the ice, first an arm, and then his head and upper body began to emerge, as if like a growing plant. Logia types are such a pain to deal with, Zoro growled. I know I've said this before, but just watching this doesn't help things. I hear ya, Sanji said, breathing out a puff of smoke. It didn't work. Memory Usopp croaked out. We're screwed. And as Aokiji's body was growing larger and longer, with most of his body was still made of ice, he began to freak out. Let's get out of here. Everybody run for your lives. Probably the best choice here, Frankie yelled, that guy's a monster all right. Memory Usopp and Chopper were both screaming in terror as Robin panted for breath. Though crouching down, about to get up, he was still taller than them. Now, he said, like a parent to a child who had been misbehaving, that wasn't a very nice thing to do. They were all tense, knowing that they did it now. Aokiji then reached down to pull out a handful of grass and then he threw them into the air. As they watched, he blew on them with an ice breath that froze them into a large, jagged ice sword. Ice saber, he said as he looked back to Robin. That looked like it would hurt. Brook cringed. Ice can easily be as hard as stone. Nami said hurriedly, and as sharp as swords. That will do more than just hurt. I didn't wanna have to kill you but now, he declared as he held up the saber. Don't just stand there. Robin, run. Frankie yelled uselessly. Too late though. Swinging the sword like how one would with a bat, Robin shut her eyes, looking ready to die fighting, but just then, Memory Zoro had charged in from the background and stopped the blade himself. Nice save. Current Chopper cheered up as the two glared at the other. Past Sanji then came running in, ready for a fight himself, and was able to kick the saber out of his hand. As Memory Usopp cheered them on, Luffy was running in to fight as well. Too bad that's not enough. Nami yelled, remembering with painful clarity what happened. Memory Zoro smirked mockingly at Sanji. I don't recall asking for your help, Cook, he told him. Memory Sanji smirked right back. Funny, he said, I was just gonna say the same thing to you, Moss Head. Now why can't you two get alone like that more often? Present-day Usopp asked them. Shut up. They snapped at him. Luffy had come up and threw back his arm. Gum. But just before he finished his attack, Aokiji grabbed hold of Zoro's arm and Sanji's leg just as Luffy threw the pistol, and punched him right in the gut. It was like watching a nightmare. The monster trio, all three who had lived up to their titles every single day, were all stopped dead in their tracks with one attack. Luffy's and Zoro's arms as well as Sanji's leg were all frozen, covered in a thick coating of ice, and when Aokiji let them go they fell to the ground in agony. Holy hell! Frankie yelled out in shock. I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't just see it with my own eyes. Brook gasped as everyone watched with stony expressions on their faces. Not that I have eyes to begin with, yo-ho-ho-ho. Now is not the time, Brook, Zoro hissed, his one good eye twitching horribly as he watched this humiliating defeat. Memory Usopp and Chopper were on the ground, screaming so loudly that they couldn't make out what they were saying, but Memory Nami was the one who looked the most freaked out. He got all three of them. At once, she screamed and the three were writhing on the ground, holding onto their limbs as if hoping to keep those parts from falling off. I'm guessing that it hurt. Usopp asked them in fear. Hurt. What do you think, you moron? Sanji demanded. No duh, it hurt. It felt like my leg was being sawed in half. If you had stayed frozen like that then they could have rotted and fall off. Chopper said at once. You were no match for him. Brook said. It's sad but true, Zoro muttered under his breath. His hand holding onto his swords was tightening, but hey, if he ever wants to fight us again, I'm ready for him. He still owed that ice freak for that. He's freezing them solid. I have to help them quickly. Memory Chopper screamed out, his eyes wide and he was trembling like a leaf, looking completely lost as to how to help. If they get frostbite, their limbs will start to rot. He turned towards Usopp who was also shaking and dripping with sweat. His eyes were twitching and his entire body seemed to be on the verge of spazzing out. Usopp. Chopper screamed at him, what are you doing? We have to help them now. I want to help. He stuttered jerkily, I'm trying. But I can't seem to move. Did he freeze me too? No, but I sure felt like it, the current Usopp whispered as Chopper screamed that he was just too scared to move. They broke down completely and were screaming out that they would help and to just hold on. Robin, run away. Past Nami yelled at their friend, but Robin didn't move, looking torn at what she should do. Wanting to run away, but seemed unable to bring herself to me. What was wrong with you? You were the one he was targeting, right? Why didn't you run? Usopp asked her quickly. Naturally, she didn't say anything as she watched the scene. Truthfully, she wanted to run. Thanks to the years of running she had been forced to live through, it was like second nature to her. But she honestly couldn't bring herself to leave her crew's side. She was tired of running. It was her fault that Aokiji was targeting them in the first place, and she couldn't for the life of her see them get hurt any more than they had been. Maybe that was why she couldn't bring herself to run. She suddenly had a guess to how Ace must have felt when he wouldn't run away no matter what. Aokiji smirked at her past self, not the least bit surprised. You have some very loyal friends, he said as she was now breathing hard as if she had just run away now, but you will never change, Nico Robin. No, she yelled back, that's not true. But she didn't get a chance to finish, for Aokiji towered over her and fell, embracing her in what looked like a hug, but as soon as he touched her, her entire body began to freeze. Robin-san, Brook cried in horror as everyone let out cries of shock. Robin, get away from him. Watch out, Luffy yelled, getting up from the ground. But nothing he said changed what happened. They stared in horror as Robin's body froze over. With her last breath she gasped out, I'm not, but then the ice spread up to her face and her voice died as their past selves stared in shock. Memory Sanji screamed out her name as the others were too horrified at what they were seeing, staring with eyes wide and gapping like fish. By the time that Aokiji pulled away, she was frozen solid, like a perfect ice sculpture, her face still capturing the fear and hesitation that she held before. It was like they were back at Little Garden and they had been turned to wax statues. This is almost as bad as watching it the first time, Chopper said tearfully, running over to hug Robin, which she was only too happy to return. So all he has to do is touch someone and they're freeze just like that. Frankie yelled out. He looked at her and asked, was it bad? It happened so quickly that I don't remember too much, she said, but, despite the fact that I was frozen, I was still aware of what was going on around me. I could hear and see everything even though ice was covering my eyes. She reached up and touched her closed eyelids. But that didn't last long. I was only conscious for a few moments before I realized I couldn't breathe and everything blacked out around me. The next thing I knew, I was waking up on the Mary with Chopper there. That is a cruel thing to do, Brook whispered as Luffy stepped forward, too stunned to speak. But the shock was quickly changed to rage and hatred. You bastard, he screamed, looking ready to kill. Aokiji opened his mouth and they could see a cloud of his breath showing them how cold it was. Stop yelling, he said in a bored way, as if explaining what was going on was a chore to him. If you thaw her out carefully she'll live. However, her body is extremely fragile in this state, so you'll have to handle her with care. He raised up a fist. If any part of her breaks, she'll die. Wait, he wouldn't. Brook yelled out. If he had, I'd have killed him. Sanji yelled to him. They all gasped, knowing what he was going to do. For example, if I were to smash her apart like this. He cried out, and they looked ready to jump in and stop it. Even the present-day Straw Hats were about to jump in and fight. Luffy screamed, running ahead of everyone. He managed to save Robin but just barely. He grabbed hold of her frozen body like how one would grab a mannequin in a clothing store and was forced to bend back to avoid Aokiji's attack. Oh, thank goodness, Brook sighed in relief, dabbing at his skull face with his feathered boa. I honestly thought for a moment there. I'm still here, she reminded them all as Chopper clung to her and held on tightly as she patted his back in a comforting way. I think it was right after I heard Luffy give the order for you all to take me back to the ship did it all fade out around me. I should hit you for scaring us like that. Nami told her firmly. We really thought you were a goner here. Aokiji looked mildly annoyed at this as Luffy gasped how close that was. But instead, he raised a leg and was about to stop on her anyway. Memory Usopp seemed to have finally gotten control of his legs again and charged in out of nowhere. He grabbed Robin's body and ran so that Luffy was hit instead. A noble sacrifice, Sanji said as the Memory, Weakling trio, were cheering and telling Usopp that was a great move. Thank you, Usopp, Robin told him and he laughed. No problem. That was nothing for the great master Usopp. He bragged. No one is faster than me. When it comes to running away you sure do move, Zoro teased and you could almost see Usopp's ego deflate at those words. Why are you all so mean? He asked them, but they didn't have any more time to tease him. Aokiji was looking deeply annoyed as he looked over at them. What in the hell are you doing? He asked, irritation clear in his voice. Luffy yelled out at them as Aokiji removed his foot. Usopp. Chopper, take Robin and run back to the ship. Once free, he rolled over onto his stomach and added, thaw her out and keep her safe. Easier said than done, Chopper sniffled, remembering how helpless he felt when he honestly didn't know what to do. It wasn't like looking over someone's symptoms and figuring out what kind of sickness they had. He never treated someone whose entire body was frozen before. It was like stumbling around in the dark without any kind of light. The other two didn't seem to have any problems with that order. They didn't stand a chance against Aokiji and they knew that Robin was the one who needed their attention right now. Right, they cried at the same time, "You got it, Captain." And so, carefully picking her up, stiff as board, they picked her up and began to carry her away. As they ran, they could hear them arguing, "Hurry." Memory Usopp yelled, "But be gentle, okay? It's cold." Past Chopper gasped, "I know, but Robin's even colder genius." He retorted as they disappeared into the distance. "That had to be miserable for you, Robin," Nami whispered. Robin merely gave her a bit of a forced smile, but didn't say anything else. Aokiji was walking calmly along, heading in the same direction where Usopp and Chopper went running off in. Every step he made, there was a slight mist coming up from his cold body. "Don't bother," he said, holding up one of his own ice-covered hands, "the world would be a much better place without that woman in it." "What was that?" snarled Current Sanji. "How'd you like to say that to my foot, you asshole?" "Yeah, you look real impressive laying there," Frankie pointed out to his past self who was struggling to stand. "Shut up," he yelled as Memory Nami stepped in and tried to hit him with her Kleem attack, only for him to catch it and look down at her with an amused look. "Not to split hairs," she exclaimed to him, "but a pirate crew pretty much consists of people just like that. We're probably the biggest crew of misfits that ever sailed the seas," present-day Nami sighed with a smile. "But that's what makes it so much fun. Yo-ho-ho-ho," Brook said happily. "In either case, he has no right to decide if someone should live or die," Zoro stated with a hard look at Aokiji. But Aokiji didn't even break stride as he answered her, "You got that right, lady. Now if you don't mind, kindly step aside." He pulled Nami's weapon with such force that she was pulled straight to the ground. The boys just couldn't stop themselves, knowing if they didn't do something, someone was gonna die. "Nami," Memory Sanji called in worry as he and Zoro both jumped up, ready for a fight to the death, for once, not wasting time fighting each other. Sanji yelled, "You're not cut out to mess with this crew." Zoro finished, both ready to strike, but then Luffy got back up, stopping them dead. "Wait, nobody attack him," he screamed at them and they skidded to a stop before staring back at him. "What is he doing?" Frankie demanded. "Isn't it obvious?" Zoro growled angrily. "He wants to handle this his way." "Wait, you mean, he's gonna?" Brook gasped. "Stay back and don't interfere," Luffy commanded them, "I'm gonna fight him one-on-one." "He's nuts. He wants to fight an admiral on his own." Usopp yelled out, what was he thinking? Didn't he just see what he could do? Of course he did. Sanji yelled back, "That's the whole point." Aokiji was glancing back at Luffy, watching him hold up both arms, both frozen and unfrozen. "What do you say?" he asked him, "The two of us can settle this on our own." Aokiji's body began to freeze over with eyes. "Fine by me," he said simply, "but, since I don't have a ship to take you back, then I'll just have to kill ya." "He's gonna get himself killed," Frankie yelled. "Yeah, if he wanted to, I'm sure that Aokiji could have killed him," Robin agreed, but for some reason he didn't, Zoro stated. "I never understood why though. Luffy's fought some tough battles, but we couldn't even take that light bastard on at Tsubayati together," Sanji said bitterly. "There was no other way for this to end." "Wait, you mean that Luffy knew he couldn't win?" Chopper asked fearfully. "Hard to say," Nami answered, biting her lip, "but he was willing to try." The Memory Straw Hats all looked upset at the order, but after a few extra long seconds, they all got up and began to head back to the ship, with Nami helping Sanji to walk with his legs still half frozen. "Luffy," Memory Zoro added quickly, and there was a stern look and a hard silence between them. "What was it?" Usopp gulped, noticing the look and frowning in confusion. "What's going on with you two?" "He got the message," Zoro stated gruffly as his past self finally turned and followed after the others, leaving the two to face each other. All he was trying to do was make sure he knew that his captain wasn't going to do something to get him killed. He was silently telling him that they would be coming back so that he better stay alive until then. Luffy must have gotten the message and gave a jerk of the head as they honored his role as captain and did what he told them. Once they were gone, the two faced each other, both of them waiting for the other to make a move. For a few moments, neither did anything, but then Aokiji threw a dart made of ice right at him, throwing it like a knife, which Luffy dodged. That was how the battle went on. Now that Luffy knew that just touching this guy was dangerous, any punches that he did throw didn't remain contact with Aokiji's body for too long. Though this spared him from being frozen for the most part, it hardly did any real good. Aokiji leapt into the air and sent a blizzard down at him, starting to create large shards of ice across their battlefield. The Straw Hats couldn't do much but watch, feeling angry that they all knew how this battle was sure to play out. "That's how he fights," Zoro stated angrily as Aokiji froze water in the air above them and sent a giant block of ice down at Luffy. "He uses his ice powers to disable and immobilize his enemies. He's trying to freeze Luffy, it'll be easy for him to kill him if he can't move." After several minutes of this, Luffy was now panting hard. Though Aokiji wasn't able to get a real hit, the battle was already taken its toll on him. Luffy's left shoulder, his stomach, and part of one of his legs were also frozen as well. "You really are persistent, aren't you?" Aokiji asked him causally, not even out of breath yet. Luffy knew that things were getting desperate, so he decided to go for a desperate move. He ran ahead, dodging as Aokiji reached out to touch him. He ducked and was able to kick him high into the air. He hit him. Usopp cheered. Really hit him? No, Robin frowned, seeing the look on Aokiji's face. The Admiral was hardly even trying, he was testing Luffy, wanting to see just how strong he really was. Perhaps Luffy knew this as well. Using a move that they hadn't seen since the fight with Crocodile, he inhaled air and twisted his body around several times. Luffy, just run, Chopper yelled. Gum gum, storm. Luffy screamed out as he went flying upwards once again. He began to throw out his fists, able to shatter him when his body turned to ice, but like with Robin, it didn't work. They could only watch as Aokiji reformed from the falling ice, and trapped Luffy in his touch. Luffy knew that it was over, they could see his eyes widen in realization. No, Brook cried, wanting to jump in and stop it from happening, but Zoro held him back. Ice time. Aokiji's attack came out and in seconds, Luffy's body was now covered with a thick coating of ice, just like Robin. It looked he was trying to escape, but like a hot tongue to a frozen pole, he couldn't seem to move. Around them, the memory became blurred and distorted, like a bunch of watercolors mixed together, though they could still hear everything, the sound was muffled like they were wearing earmuffs, and suddenly they could hear a strange beating, one so faint that they could barely hear it. It's over, Nami whispered in stunned disbelief. I knew that Luffy was outmatched, but to think he was beaten this easily. This is the power that a Marine Admiral has, Robin answered grimly. They are all at least this strong if not stronger. But out of the 3 admirals 2 years ago, Aokiji was probably the most merciful, Zoro nodded. He listened to the beating sound before he understood what it was. After all, the few times that he was fighting, such as with Mihawk and that Mr. One Jerk, when he was on the brink of death, he could hear it as well. Luffy's heart. Yes, Robin confirmed and the others gaped at her. This was what it was like for me as well. I was aware of what was going on. Unable to move or do anything else, you can start to hear your own heart. Oh, don't say that. Usopp gasped. Do you know how hard we had to work to bring you 2 back to life? It took you guys days to heal. As they watched, through the swirl of colors and shapes, they could see the tall shape of what had to be Aokiji there. He placed Luffy's frozen body right in front of him before he sat down, looking at him curiously. What's he doing? Brook asked. I don't know, why doesn't he want to kill Luffy? Usopp asked nervously, not that I'm complaining about it, but… Ah man, Aokiji suddenly said and they looked up at his blurred form. You tricked me. Some of the Straw Hats were baffled at that, wondering what he was talking about. Luffy didn't stand a chance, he was now frozen and at Aokiji's complete mercy, so where was the trick? But he answered that for them. The moment I agreed to fight you one-on-one, I settled on defeating you and you alone. But that your plan wasn't it. Aokiji asked him, if I were to attack your crew now, I'd be the bad guy here. Isn't that right, Captain? You mean that he planned this? Chopper gasped in horror. That he was willing to sacrifice himself so that we could have time to escape. He couldn't have known that he would have won, Robin answered, guilt rising up inside her at the reminder that she was the one who was responsible for this. Compared to the other admirals, she knew that Aokiji had a sense of honor and he will be true to his word not to attack the others after accepting a one-on-one battle. But she knew that he wouldn't be the type of man to break his word. But that didn't explain why he chose to spare Luffy though. Or, maybe, you actually thought you could beat me? Aokiji asked, sounding amused at the very thought. None of them knew what to think anymore. Luffy was usually confident with his abilities and his strength, but even he knew his limits and when facing someone stronger. Through the ever-growing blurry vision, they could just make out Aokiji standing up and dusting off his clothes. He looked right up at Luffy and said seriously, let me give you a piece of advice. Keep a close eye on Nico Robin. What's that asshole talking about now? Sanji demanded bitterly. Luffy's vision was fading and as the sound of Luffy's heart got louder, starting to drown out Aokiji's voice, they noticed in horror that it sounded like it was starting to slow down. Eventually, she'll grow to be more than you can handle, Aokiji's voice growing ever more faint. The nature of the violent fate she was born into will be a greater danger than you can imagine. More of a burden than you could ever hope to bear. He was giving him warning, for he wasn't wrong, Robin answered softly, her head lowering slightly. Don't even talk like that. Chopper said, sounding angry at her. You're not a burden. Not at all. That's right. We're all burdens if you think about it. Frankie said firmly. The rest of the world pretty much gave up on all of us, so that's why we're here now. Remember what I told you on our way to Annie's lobby. That being alive, that just being who you are, isn't a sin, she recited with a smile. He may be an idiot, but he makes a good point, Sanji said. Hey, watch it. Frankie retorted, I'm SUUU, awesome this week and don't think you didn't notice. What they mean is, Nami said, rolling her eyes at them, is that none of us see you as a burden, Robin. We need you. She didn't answer them, but she was smiling at those words. Her heart feeling so full that it felt as if it might burst. But that disappeared as she watched Aokiji's form walk right up so that he was standing in front of him. That's what it means to have that woman as part of your crew, he said and they saw he was raising up his foot and their hearts froze, knowing that he had his chance, just one kick and their captain was gone forever. You have been warned, he said before he changed direction and ended up shattering a pillar of ice next to them. Mr. Monkey D. Luffy. They all stared, unsure of what to think or say to what they just witnessed. He didn't. Usopp whispered as Luffy's heartbeats were slowing down even more and everything was growing so dark around them that they could only make out shapes and Aokiji's voice was almost gone now. It would be easy to break you and kill you right here and now, he said, his voice now so muffled that they could hardly make any words out. But I have a debt to honor. What debt? Brook asked, sounding lost. Well, he did say that Garp helped him out once, you think? Nami asked. I don't think so. Zoro frowned as the shadowy form of the tall man bent down to pick up something off the ground, his coat most likely, before his faint voice said, consider us even for you taking care of Crocodile. For taking out Crocodile he decided to let him live. Nami sighed in relief. As well as, Aokiji's voice added before he paused, never mind. Something to do with Smoker. See ya. What about Smoker? Usopp asked, now lost. I think the fact that Luffy wanted to save him back at Alabasta, Zoro said, remembering when they almost ended up drowning down in that cage. He and Smoker are friends so he's grateful that Luffy wanted to help him when he didn't have to. Well, that explains why he decided to spare him then, Sanji said anxiously, but he was worried about Luffy here. Where the hell were he and Moss Head? What was taking so long? There was nothing going on around them, the shapes had blackened so that there was nothing but darkness. Luffy's heart had almost stopped now. And by the time it did, they could make out Memory Zoro and Sanji's voices in the distance. They couldn't hear what they were saying, but it was definitely their voices, and it sounded like they were arguing. But Luffy's heart had stopped right then and there and they guessed that he finally lost consciousness for the memory faded around them. That was hard to watch, Brooke said softly, what happened? Were you both alright? Thanks to Chopper, Robin said as Chopper jumped from her arms and began to twirl around a little, telling her that it was nothing and to just shut up because he wasn't listening. We found him frozen right there, Sanji said, didn't think about it at the time, but I guess we should have realized that Aokiji had a reason for sparing him. One good turn deserves another, Brooke nodded. I suppose that you are glad that Luffy-san told you to pull Smoker up or you, Zoro-san. Whatever, he said indifferently. Truthfully, this was really the starting point for their growing. After seeing the kind of power an admiral had, they all worked harder than ever, trying to become stronger. Luffy especially worked to be less naive about future conflicts and worked to push his strength beyond his limits. Anyway, we carried Luffy back to the ship, and just tried to melt the ice around these two as fast as we could, Sanji said, sighing a little when he realized his cigarette was growing shorter. That was far from fun. Robin nodded, as she remembered finally waking up on the Mary. Flashback. It was cold. That was all she was truly aware of, this terrible cold. But there was also warmth around her, she could feel warm water on her face, trying to heat up her frozen insides. There was a terrible ache inside her chest as if she had been kicked by a wild animal or something. She soon realized that she was soaked through and could hear the sound of running water. After a few more minutes, she heard voices around her, familiar and worried voices. She opened her eyes. Robin. Chopper's voice screamed out and she focused her vision on his terrified face. He was also soaked as well, his fur smelling of a wet dog. She blinked, not understanding what was going on, or why she was freezing, her body shaking violently even with the gallons of water being dropped on her head. She was in the shower room, she could see that much, but she couldn't remember how she got there. Her head had felt stiff, as if it hadn't moved in a long time and was vaguely surprised to see that the room was flooded and she was sitting in the tub, full clothed and soaked to the bone. Doctor? She asked in confusion, not understanding why she was so cold when the water was so warm. But then it suddenly came back, Aokiji, he was here. He attacked her and her crew. She sat up so suddenly she splashed even more water on the floor, but she cried out in pain as she gripped her chest. Don't push yourself. Chopper commanded, I only just got your heart beating again. My heart. She croaked in confusion. What happened? I was frozen, Yeah, you were, Chopper said, but we can explain more later. I'll make sure that you'll be alright. But you need to stay still. She had been frozen, she remembered that much. And she could just remember hearing her captain's voice calling for them to take her back to the ship and get her treated. So that was what happened. She was frozen and her heart stopped beating, and that was why she hurt so much. But then she saw something that almost scared her heart into stopping a second time. Chopper transformed and was carrying Luffy over. Most of his body was out of the ice as well, but he was still half frozen as he moved him more so that he was under the falling water. Luffy, she asked anxiously as her teeth chattered together. Keep this towel on your head, it will keep more heat in your body, Chopper commanded. But Luffy, she asked, what little energy she had left leaving her quickly. He'll be alright, Chopper said determining. He's strong. Once we get all the ice off him, I'm sure that he'll be just fine. I'm just moving you so that we can get him under the water. She didn't say a word, too tired to move or say anything else as guilt racked her insides. Aokiji was here, normally she would just run away like she always had done, leaving her protectors behind to deal with the enemy. But she couldn't bring herself to run. After traveling with them for only a short time, she knew they were strong, but they were no match for an admiral, this she knew. Even 20 years ago, Aokiji was a monster. She shut her eyes and remembered Saul's face. She had come so close to sharing his fate after all these years, and Luffy as well. Another man with the middle initial D. Instead of running, however, she chose to stay. Hearing him say that she would one day betray the Straw Hats made her angry, but more than anything, she felt fear. Because she had seen this before in the past countless times. Yes, she had betrayed people and they had betrayed her. That was just her life. That was how she had lived up till now. She opened her eyes again and looked at Luffy's face as Chopper was trying to wake him up. Looking encouraged with Luffy let out a strangled gasp and was breathing again. She let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. He and the others had protected her, defended her, and said that he would fight a man who had haunted nightmares for 20 years, and what did he get out of it? Almost freezing to death for her. She looked away. What happened? What happened to the others after she was frozen? Chopper, she asked weakly. Huh, he asked, don't try to talk now. You're too weak. We're not out of the woods yet. I'll listen, she croaked out. What happened? After I was. She couldn't finish, she was too tired to do so, but Chopper seemed to understand. He had quickly told her that Luffy ordered them to take her back to the ship and get her treated. Zoro and Sanji had to jump into the ocean to get the ice off their limbs and had them bandaged up before they went running back to Luffy, who had challenged Aokiji to a one-on-one fight. According to Zoro, he said that they just found him frozen there before they brought him back. He then leaned his head against Luffy's chest and his eyes brightened, tears burning. I can hear it, he gasped out, jumping down and went running to the door. His heart's going again. She sighed in relief as she watched him go running out to tell the others the good news and to start bringing in warm towels for them. She leaned back against the tub, feeling so tired she knew she couldn't fight the urge to sleep for much longer. She looked to Luffy's blue face and knew that she must look a lot like that as well. But right now, she was sick with worry for what happened. It was all her fault. She knew that. She remembered Aokiji's words and they hit her with the speed of a cannonball. She was using this crew for protection, just like she used every other crew and organization in the past. Just being here with her was constantly putting their lives in danger. They've done nothing but accept her and treated her well since she arrived, even though she had been their enemy. And here she was repaying them by having them risk their lives for her. Two sides of her were conflicting with each other. A part of her wanted to just leave the crew, it would be best for them all if she did decide to leave. But the other part, she didn't know what to do, she hated not knowing why she was feeling like this. Just then, the door opened and Chopper and Nami both came in, with Chopper giving Nami orders what to do. She could feel her muscles in her face working again as her lips curled up into a smile, for the first time in a long time, feeling safe, and was able to drift off to sleep, leaving herself to their care. She woke up much later. She glanced at the window and could see the night sky. She had been moved to the galley and was laying on a warm mattress. She had been changed out of her soaking wet clothes and in one of her long dresses. The others were all there as well. Nami was at the cooktop with Sanji, laying blankets near the stove so that they could get hot as Sanji was filling the entire room with a warmth from whatever he was cooking. She could hear snoring next to her and glanced to her side to see that Luffy was lying on a separate mattress and out like a light. She smiled a little at that, her whole body stiff and sore, her face feeling as if she had a bad sunburn, but everyone was alright. Robin, Usopp's voice came and she looked over to see that the others were glancing at her. Robin, Chopper said happily, running over to her and checking her temperature. How are you? Are you still feeling cold? Are you in any pain? No, she said, her voice faint and weak. Not pain really, just stiff. I got something that'll help you, Sanji said, and he came over with a steaming mug of hot chocolate. Something to help you get that beautiful smile back on that face of yours where it belongs. It was pretty much a blur after that. Nami came over to help her sit up and she grateful took the drink, feeling her insides warm up even more and felt better at once. They told her that Aokiji was gone. Apparently after he froze Luffy, he just up and left. After she finished her drink and Nami gave her a few hot towels, Chopper gave her one last checkup before he told they all decided to turn in. They were all exhausted and didn't have the strength to even go downstairs to their rooms. They all ended up sleeping in that galley with them, wanting to be close by should something happen to the two who lay recovering. She lay awake though, long into the night, staring up at the ceiling, and unable to think of what to do, trying to fight the tears that wanted to come to her eyes. End of flashback. And that was it. Frankie's voice asked suddenly and she was brought back to the present. As she was lost in memories, they explained to Frankie and Brooke how they had to wait several days before they felt the two were strong enough to travel again. Things had been pretty much smooth sailing since then. I'm glad to hear that you were all safe, Brooke said with a sigh. That must have been frightening for you all. Not one of our better days, Nami said tiredly. And things only got harder from this moment onwards. Just then the bright sunlight was back and they were inside Luffy's memories once again. They were scattered on the Mary, but were in a strange place. There was a large lighthouse, but they were still out in the middle of the ocean. Franky's eyes widened. He knew this place, there was no doubt in his mind. Just then the memory straw hats were all getting to their feet as they looked around, wondering if they had come ashore and were stuck on something. But at that moment, they suddenly heard a loud clanging of what sounded like bells going off, and a post with flashing lights was going off so loudly that it made their eardrums ache. "What is that?" Brook called in confusion, his hands up to his skeleton skull, as if hoping to block out the noise. "It's a warning," Franky smirked, "which can only mean one thing." "And what's that?" Brook yelled over the racket. But Franky didn't answer, for they heard what had to be a loud whistle in the distance along with the sounds of something big and heavy coming at them at a great speed. They all looked up to the starboard side, and there it was. Hurtling towards them was a large metal monster, steam billowing out of a chimney-like stand on its head, and coming so fast that there was no way that they could stop even if it saw them. Brook was stunned to see such a thing, unable to believe it, not knowing what it was. "Full reverse right now," Memory Nami screamed, "turn 180 degrees. "What the hell is that?" Memory Sanji yelled, voicing what Brook was thinking. "The sea train." Franky laughed proudly until he realized that they were on the tracks. "What the hell were you doing? Move before that thing runs right over you. Believe me, that's not something you want to go through." "How were we supposed to know what was going on?" Usopp yelled back as Memory Nami began screaming orders that they had to get out of its path since clearly wasn't stopping. Brook wanted to ask why they couldn't move, but he was unable to find his voice. The Memory Straw Hats went to the oars and were working hard to try and get the Mary to move. With a great heave, they managed to get off just in the nick of time, almost flying away to avoid getting run over. The wind was so strong that it almost ended up blowing them over, but as they glanced back, they could see a giant frog, about the size of Franky, with yellow-brown skin and black hair worn up in a chanmage. He was covered with large scars on his body and stood there, somehow standing on the water as he faced the train. "Yokozuna!" Franky yelled out at once, but it was too late. The train collided with the frog and he was sent flying backwards before diving into the water. "What is going on here?" Brook yelled, staring as the rest of the metal monster went roaring past them like snake. "That's the sea train, the puffing Tom," Franky yelled out, "which can only mean one thing. I'm almost home." "You're home?" Brook gasped, the train going by. "Man, I didn't think you guys almost got run over by that," Franky said, not sure if he should laugh or not. "Well, it's not like we planned on this happening." Nami snapped at him. "How were we supposed to know what that thing was? Luffy went after the frog and suddenly we got stuck here." "Yeah, but if we hadn't, we never would have met the others here, right?" Chopper asked her and her eyes softened a little. "Wait, why were you after the frog?" Brook asked, startled. "After we fully recovered from our run-in with Aokiji, we went back to trying to find the next island." Usopp said quickly, "On our way there, we saw this giant frog doing the crawl stroke and Luffy wanted to eat it, so he ordered us to go after it. And next thing we know we're here." "Yo-ho-ho-ho, I see," Brook said as the train finished passing and feeling calmer knowing that thing was gone. "But, what is it exactly?" Franky opened his mouth, proudly about to tell him all about it, but their past selves were gaping like fish as they stared ahead at the disappearing train in shock. It looked like it was spitting out smoke. Memory Chopper gasped out. They were all stunned, trying to figure out what just happened, but then they heard a child's voice cry out, "Granny! Granny! Come quick! Pirates!" Franky spun around faster than any of them. There were two figures on the platform that led inside the station. A young girl with her long hair tied up in pigtails that seemed to stand upwards, and a loud mouth that was curled up into a smile despite the alarm in her voice, while next to her was a large, light blue and cream-colored rabbit. "Chimney! Gondi!" Franky cried out before he broke down sobbing. "Aw man, I miss you guys. You know them, Franky-san?" Brook asked curiously. "Know them?" he gasped out as he turned away so that they couldn't see his tears. "Shorty and the rabbit, they were like family. It's good to see them again." Chopper cried in happiness as he jumped to the platform and went running over to them. But at that moment they heard a slurred voice calling out from inside, "Bah! Is that true, Chimney?" "Okie dokie then." "Oh no," Sanji groaned out. Suddenly an old woman came out of the station, her facial features making it look as if she was always smiling, with a body that made her look like a frog, and thick green hair tied back in messy pigtails. Her face was red, and there was a bottle of alcohol in her hands. "In that case," she hiccuped, "better bring Granny that transponder snail." Old Granny Kokura, Franky smiled fondly while Sanji was shaking his head when he saw her. After seeing the heaven-sent beauties at Fishman Island, he couldn't see how she could ever be one of them. "It's so good to see them all again, man," Franky sniffled, "I missed them." He burst out crying at that as Usopp patted his metal arm comfortingly. Chimney meanwhile was doing what Granny told her and went back inside. The Memory Straw Hats all glanced at each other worriedly, wondering if they could make it away knowing that if they called for help and the Marines showed up, then they'd all be in for another fight. But it turned out they didn't need to worry. For when Chimney came running back with a transponder snail and gave it to her grandma. Hello?" Kokura asked drunkenly into the receiver, "Who is this?" Sorry, you've got the wrong number. I'm guessing that she's had one too many. Brooke asked as they all had sweat drop around their heads. She always has one too many, Frankie nodded fondly. She's totally drunk, Memory Usopp yelled out. However, that probably worked in their favor. Because if she had been sober, she actually might have called for backup. They came on board the platform and even shared some food with them to show that they meant them no harm. After seeing the food, the trio seemed to warm right up to them and even introduced themselves. The little girl was Chimney, and their pet rabbit who thinks he's a cat was named Gandhi, and finally their grandmother Kokura who was the station conductor. What kind of person names a drunkard the station master? Usopp asked in confusion. She helped to build the Puffing Tom, Frankie said with a laugh. She watched every part of the train and railway being built. But, I can see what you mean. Sounds like you know her really well, Brooke said to him. She's a good friend, Frankie nodded. Insane, but in a good way. We wouldn't still be here if it weren't for her, Nami pointed out with a smile, and at those words, Usopp, Sanji, and Zoro all turned blue in the face, as if relieving a bad memory. Oh, grow up, Nami snapped at them. My name's Luffy, Luffy said seriously, folding his arms. And I'm gonna be king of the pirates. Really? Chimney asked interestedly. Yep, he answered, and Kokura laughed. I like you, you're funny, she said. Oh, that's good, Chopper laughed this time. Luffy really knows how to make friends easily, doesn't he? He's a natural social butterfly, Robin commented. He makes it really easy for others to get comfortable with us. Memory Nami stepped forward then once she felt that it was safe to talk to them without fear of them calling for help. By the way, Chimney, she said curiously, jerking her thumb in the direction where the sea train went. That thing's a steamboat, right? Seems awfully long to me, can't imagine it getting very far. Steamboat nothing. Frankie laughed, remembering helping to build that beauty. A custom-built 4x4 locomotive with a streamlined boiler and smoke box, she was truly a beauty, a work of art in his opinion. Chimney seemed to agree as she chuckled at what Nami said. You probably never seen anything like this, she said proudly. Seeing that it's the only one in the world. It's not a steamboat, it's a sea train known as the Puffing Tom. The Puffing Tom, Brooke said, gazing in the direction it went. I've never seen anything like it, that's for sure. How does it work? Nami asked her. It uses a steam engine to turn its paddle wheels and run on a railway, she answered brightly as she finished swallowing. Must have taken a long time to build, Robin answered. I've heard that another sea train from Water 7 was created not too long ago. Really? Frankie asked at once, his eyes shining, but she merely smiled in a way saying that she'll tell him more about it in a minute. Railway. Memory Usopp repeated, sounding lost. Uh-huh, she answered, pointing to the water. If you look closely you can see the tracks right beneath the waves. The train goes the same route every day, taking people from one island to the next. It can even carry ships and packages too. They all looked down and they could see what she was talking about. Indeed, there were iron tracks just below the water so that they couldn't be seen. Luffy and Usopp looked over the side to see what she was talking about. Oh wow, Luffy said impressed, funny we didn't notice it before. No kidding, Memory Sanji stated, we ran right into it. Oh, so that's how you got stuck like that, Brooke said happily, glad that we got that worked out. Does that happen a lot? Chopper asked Frankie. People running into the tracks. Not really, Frankie confessed, thinking it over, there's a handful of islands around this part of the Grand Line. Most people use the train to get from one to the other, and most ships, especially pirate ships, don't usually make it this far. Even if they do, they could end up at any one of the other islands and avoid the tracks altogether. So we're just lucky? Zoro asked with his eyebrow raised. Pretty much, he laughed back. You should be more careful. Chimney scolded them, pointing up at the signal that had been blazing a moment ago. Didn't you see the signal? It had a bell ringing and everything. Is that what that thing is for? Memory Usopp asked, pointing up to it as well. I thought it was just here to welcome us. How were we supposed to know? Red flashing lights and loud noise doesn't normally mean good things, does it? Frankie asked him knowingly. And if we couldn't figure it out, then that frog sure wouldn't get it, would he? Luffy asked them grumpily, it was awful rude of you to hit him like that. We were gonna catch him and cook him, you know. Isn't it considered just as rude to catch and cook someone? Zoro asked. Zoro, you're getting to be just as bad as Robin, Usopp hissed to him. Oh, Chimney asked calmly, you saw the frog. That's Yokozuna. Shore was an awesome swimmer, Luffy said, glancing back at the tracks where they last saw the frog. Either way I wouldn't worry about him, he's pretty tough, Chimney answered, not at all surprised by Luffy telling her that their train just ran over a giant frog. In fact, that isn't the first time he's challenged the train and lost. He really is a stubborn frog, Frankie said fondly, so excited at the idea of seeing Water 7 again, that he was practically dancing around. He's really kinda a pain, Chimney added, if you wanna see him again just hang around here, I'm sure he'll pop up. He's tough alright, Nami nodded, remembering how that frog jumped in and took those giant black ball and chain at Eni's lobby. One of those balls was enough to bring a king bull down, but he took it all in stride. Wow, Luffy said in understanding, that's why he didn't run. I thought that Frog was just stupid, but it turns out he was just being super manly. How is that manly? Nami demanded, standing there and not moving in front of a moving train. It's like suicide. Frankie touched his metal nose for a moment, remember the pain and how close he had to dying that day. He had to admit that she had a point. Easy for you to say. Chimney yelled, and for the first time she sounded frustrated, you don't have to put up with him all the time. I can't even count how many times he's broken the rail guard. And just imagine what it's like for the passengers when he slams into the train. He's just a big troublemaker, Frankie exclaimed firmly. How could he not be? Anyone who once had the honor of working along with Tom turned out to be one after all. But Yokozuna had a big heart, even if you have good reason you just can't stay angry with him. That's crazy, Luffy said before he declared, alright. Since that frog is a fighter like me, then I'm not gonna eat him after all. Once that was out of the way, Granny Kokura asked them where they were planning on going to next, telling them that the sea train was connected to several of the nearby islands and started to tell them a little about each of them. Nami thanked her for that, but said that they didn't need to take the train, they would just follow their log. Oh, Chimney asked curiously, where's it pointing to? She held up her wrist and answered, should be someplace east of here. Frankie beamed widely as Kokura said, I see, well, in that case it's Water 7 for sure. The train you saw on your way here just came from Blue Station on that island. They call it the City of Water. I think you'll like it. Like it nothing. Frankie cheered out, ow. I'm going home. I'd like to see your home, Frankie-san, Brooke said, but, didn't you once say that you were from the South Blue? I was born in the South Blue, Frankie admitted, but when I was a kid, my parents, who were also pirates, took me to the Grand Line apparently. All I know for sure was that they dumped me off their ship near Water 7 and I was recused by the legendary shipwright Tom who made me one of his apprentices. Harsh, Sanji stated sympathetically, not exactly loving parents then. Screw them, Frankie said, waving his hand around, I don't even remember what they looked like anymore. It happened years ago when I was 4. He was more a father to me than they ever could have been. And he's the same one who made the puffing Tom. Nami asked. That's right, Frankie beamed. Then that means that you helped to make it too. Chopper said brightly. Frankie laughed. Maybe a little. It's funny, Robin said as she turned back to the scene to see Kokura telling them about Water 7's shipwrights and shipyards, how they wouldn't be able to find better shipwrights if they looked. I remember them calling you Cutty Flam a few times while we were at Annie's lobby. Does that have anything to do with it? Cutty Flam, Usopp and Chopper repeated. Frankie coughed and said, it's nothing. It's a weird name anyway. I'm guessing that's your real name. Robin asked knowingly. Wait, Frankie yelled out, how in the hell did you know? I didn't, she smiled, it was just a guess, until now. Your real name's Cutty Flam. Sanji burst out laughing as Frankie turned red. Shut up, he yelled as they all started to laugh at him, not because it was such a stupid name, but because of how angry Frankie was. Thankfully for him, it didn't last long because the Memory Straw Hats were all excited at hearing about Water 7's shipyards. They couldn't have asked for anything better and couldn't wait to get going. But right then, Luffy said loudly, beaming happily at them all, it's settled. We're gonna find the best shipwright in Water 7 and get him to join our crew. Well, you sure got him all right. Frankie said proudly. We sure did, Cutty Flam, Usopp teased. You want me to hurt you? He hollered back. Oh, is that so? Kokura asked, who seemed to have taken a liking to them. In that case, hold on a sec. She forced herself to stand up from the stool and went inside the station for a moment. They all looked confused, wondering what she was gonna do, but a few minutes later she came back with a couple sheets of paper and handed it over to them. I got a little present for ya, she slurred. This is a little map of the city and a reference letter. Just give this to a fella named Iceberg and I promise he'll fix your ship up good. Water 7 is a pretty confusing place, so try not to get lost. Ice for brains, huh? Frankie said thoughtfully. I forgot about him. You two were like brothers when I saw you together, Robin teased. Please, he said, rolling his eyes. Just because we worked together under Tom doesn't make us all best friends or anything like that. You and Iceberg were apprentices. Well, if Tom was as amazing as you said he was, then that doesn't surprise me how good you two are, Usopp said, thinking back to how they had the sunny done for them in just a few days. Their memory selves were ecstatic at Kokura's kindness and were thanking her over and over as they got back on the merry. Though it's strange she wanted to help you guys out like that when she barely knew you, Brooke said. Frankie shrugged as he told them, when we were building the Sunny, she told me that from the first moment she saw you guys, you reminded her of someone. But he didn't tell them that she said they reminded her of the old Pirate King and his crew when she met them. She said that it brought back so many good memories with Tom that she wanted to help them out, and those feelings only grew after seeing how determined they were to save Robin. What was it that she said? That kid may have a screw loose, but come to think of it, so did Roger. It's funny, all those years ago, Tom helped him out, and now Tom's workers are coming together to help out these guys. We just never seem to learn, do we? But I got a feeling that Tom would have done the same thing. He smirked at that. Yeah, he knew that Tom wouldn't have hesitated for a moment in helping them. We'll be heading back to Water 7 soon, Chimney told them brightly as they leaned over the edge to say goodbye to them. Maybe we'll see you there. Sounds like a plan to me, Kokura said agreeably, holding up her bottle of whiskey in her hands, and if you like, I'll even give you guys a tour of all my favorite drinking holes. She laughed. Sounds good. Luffy smiled down at them. We'll try to keep a lookout for you. Good thing too, Zoro stated, without them we never would have been able to get you back, Robin. I really hate not knowing what you all are talking about, Brooke sighed. It's hard knowing that I'm the last crew member to have joined up with you all and have missed out on so many adventures. But you're here now, right? Usopp added and Brooke cheered up. True, yo-ho-ho-ho. And what a journey it has been so far, he said, dancing around a little. How I missed it. It'll take about a week for the log to log onto the next island, so you'll have plenty of time to do some sightseeing. Kokura informed them with a final wave. Great. Sounds like fun, Luffy said before he turned back to them all. Okay. Everyone ready? Time to set sail. And the memory faded as they all cheered at those words. Man, it's gonna be good to see home again, Frankie said, speaking of which, he added, looking up to Robin. What did you mean about another sea train? Just a rumor I heard shortly before I returned to Sabayati, she informed him. Apparently they were almost finished with the second sea train and they call it the Puffing Ice. Puffing Ice? Frankie smirked. Iceberg, you ham. But still, I'd like to go back someday and see it for myself, after I make sure that Sunny makes it all the way to the end of the world that is. Hey, but as he thought about it, he remembered the day he told Tom his dream to create a ship that could one day sail over every ocean. And how he would join that crew and be its shipwright. Tom fully agreed that it was a grand dream and added that if he did join a crew like that, then he truly would surpass him. You know, Usopp said, you told me a little about Tom once before. I gotta hand it to your old master. He must have been one hell of a guy. You said that it was thanks to him and the sea train that Water 7 was completely reborn because of it. He truly was, Frankie nodded. Hey, did I ever tell you that he was the one that made the Oro Jackson? That was the ship of the old king of the pirates. Tom had been the one who created the Oro Jackson, Roger's ship, the only ship in the world who had sailed the Grand Line completely. It was almost like Tom knew what would happen. That he would build a ship that would carry the next king to the end of the Grand Line, and he joined up with them. He was. Chopper gasped out in amazement. That's right, Frankie smirked. So that should tell you how great a man he truly was. He hesitated for a moment before he opened up his stomach and reached way in the back to pull out an old photo that he had treasured for a long time. Here he is, he said, Tom and Tom's workers. He held it out for them to see it. There was a young Frankie sitting there, but here he was much younger. It was before he modified his body to be a cyborg, at least they guess it since his arms and nose look normal. It was also the first time they had seen him wearing anything but his Speedo. If they had to guess, he looked to be in his early 20s. He wasn't paying attention to the picture being taken though, as he was fighting with a man about his age right next to him. For most of them they had seen him before. It was a young iceberg, and it was strange to see him in something other than his professional clothing he usually wore when they met him as the mayor. They could see Granny Kokura behind them with Yokozuna. They both looked young too, the frog about half the size he was in the memory they just saw, and Kokura looked to be taller and slimmer, about in her 40s they had to guess. But in the middle of them all was a large cowfish fishman with short horns and a large yellow body. He also had thick white, curly hair and beard as he grinned at the picture being taken, one hand on Iceberg and Frankie's shoulders. This was taken after the Puffing Tom was built, he said as Nami took the picture so that she could get a better look at it. Well, I'll be, Zoro said, looking over her shoulder to see. A fishman, Chopper said in surprise. Wow, that's cool. He was one hell of a guy, and a great teacher, Frankie smiled. Everything I know about shipbuilding I learned from him. He looked up at the sky. Not a day goes by that I don't think about him. What happened to him? Brooke asked, before he realized that he said something that Frankie probably didn't want to talk about. It happened about 10 years ago, he said, shaking his head. I don't like to think about it if I can help it. Let's just say that I'm glad that I got to pay to government for what they did. You and Iceberg sure look like brothers here, Nami laughed a little, hoping to change the subject. Like how Luffy and Ace were when they were kids. Yeah well, I find Iceberg's company bearable, most of the time, Frankie admitted. He's a pain in the ass just like I am though. I guess that's why we put up with each other. We are most humbled that you trust us enough to show us this, Frankie-san, Brooke said politely as Frankie took the picture back and put it away. Yeah well, he shrugged, I guess that I thought that you needed to know what the greatest shipwright who ever lived looked like. They smiled at the embarrassed look on his face, but they didn't say anything to that as the memory appeared again. It seemed to be in the afternoon. There was a comforting wind behind them, sending the ship sailing on through the calm waves. They were all on deck and Memory Nami was just talking about the nice wind, and at this rate, they'll make it to Water 7 sooner than they thought. Frankie looked ready to jump around and joy at those words. Meanwhile, Memory Sanji was telling the others that he'd find the hottest looking girl in Water 7 for their shipwright. Instead, we get a pervert cyborg, Sanji sighed. Why thank you, Frankie said. It wasn't supposed to be a compliment. He retorted. What do I care if the shipwright's hot? Luffy demanded, I want a huge manly dude. Like even bigger than a bear. Like 16 feet tall. Well, Frankie sniggered, I may not be 16 feet tall, but I have to say he got his wish. He then started to laugh happily, sounding more upbeat than he had been all day. A guy that big wouldn't even fit on our ship. Memory Usopp said. And who knows how much food he'll have to eat. Doesn't matter, Luffy would still out-eat anyone here, the current Sanji said knowingly. All that matters is that he's good at his job, Memory Zoro said in his usual bored tone. If you ask me, the real problem is trying to find someone crazy enough to go out to sea with a bunch of pirates. That is always the hard part, Sanji nodded. Then again, we all joined a pirate crew, so what does that make us, I wonder? Crazy, Usopp sighed, but, I hope the good kind of crazy. Size doesn't matter. Memory Chopper chirped up with a big smile, I'm just happy we're gonna be making a new friend. Even though we sure didn't start off that way, did we? Nami stated, her eyebrows raised at Frankie, who laughed awkwardly. Hey now, he said, defending himself, it all worked out in the end, didn't it? We're lucky we ran into that train station on the way, Memory Nami said, holding up paper. This map should be a big help. All we have to do is follow Kokura's direction to that iceberg guy and we're set. But when she opened the paper, it looked like it had been drawn in crayon by a 3-year-old. In anger, she crumpled it up and threw it on the deck, yelling out insults before Chopper picked it up and said that it looked like one of Luffy's drawings. Speaking of Luffy, he was holding up a badly drawn picture and telling them that he wanted their shipwright to look like that. If I saw a guy like that, I'd run. Memory Usopp said, looking freaked out at the paper. I wouldn't just run, I'd jump into the sea to get away from that freak. Memory Sanji said as he looked at it closely, but he looks like he might be part octopus, so even that might not save me. I don't know, I think it looks a lot like you, Frankie, Robin stated, unable to stop the chuckle coming to her lips. Looks just like him to me, Zoro added. What? Frankie yelled out angrily as the others laughed. Why I oughta. Don't you have anything better to talk about? Memory Zoro called in annoyance as Robin just smiled as she listened to them all talk and argue with each other. There was a very strange look of peace in her eyes as she watched them all work. The current Robin smiled as well, remembering the reason she felt so happy then and there. But suddenly, Memory Usopp went running and jumped up to the mast, hugging it tightly and looking a little sad as Luffy asked him, why are you hugging the ship, Usopp? I know that all these tin plates may not seem like much to you, he said, rubbing his cheek against the wood and steel plating, but they bring back a lot of fond memories for me. He smiled as he finally looked up. I almost hate to see them go, but it'll all be worth it if the Mary can finally get the repairs she needs. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Warm Memories and Brotherly Bonds by RoseDragonWitch. The smile faded on the current Usopp's lips as he remembered what was gonna happen. This was it would be later this very same day that they would be seeing. He stepped back, suddenly feeling sick to his stomach and wanted to skip over these memories. But that ship, Lamb-chan is. Brook began as they all sighed miserably. It's a miracle that old girl was able to stay together up till now, Frankie sighed. She's practically forcing herself to keep fighting while she's on her deathbed. Do you have to say it like that? Usopp demanded hotly. I'm just telling you the truth, Frankie said, though it was in a more gentle voice. She's barely able to float here. But she must have been determined to get you as far as she could, to make sure that you were in the right place to find another ship to take you. Brook was surprised by that comment. The way that he was talking about the Mary was as if she was alive. But when he looked around, the others were all smiling sadly at his words. Mary was one of a kind, Frankie went on, even Ice for Brains admitted that. But nothing can stick around forever. Don't I know it, Usopp said gloomily as the others gave him a sympathetic look. I feel the same way, Memory Sanji said, and they glanced back to see him coming up from below deck, after a change of clothes. I'm proud of her battle like everyone else, but she's taken a real beating since we've entered the Grand Line. After seeing it, I have to agree, Frankie nodded. She's taken on an excessive amount of damage. She's been blown up, impaled, ran into icebergs, and even sliced up. I mean, she's in shambles. Memory Sanji looked down at the deck and stepped to hear the board squeak. The deck squeaks and we've got leaks popping up everywhere. Nobody wants to admit it, but if we don't fix this up soon we're as good as sunk. Yeah, Luffy said, but even if we can't get a shipwright for the crew we still have plenty of money. We can do more than just fix her. We can power her up too. The current Usopp sat down on the ground, feeling so much shame it was as if his insides were shriveling up. He couldn't stand this, and it was only made worse when they all began to talk about the kinds of plans as to what kinds of things they could add. He was glad when Zoro called out that he could see the island and Frankie was the first one up the deck to get a look. He's right, Luffy called happily, I can see water 7. And he wanted to break out the oars and row the rest of the way, with the others telling him that he shouldn't wear them out before they get there. When they got closer, they could get a full look at it. They were all amazed, their eyes wide and struck dumb. At the very top of the city they could see an enormous fountain in a volcano shape and water was pouring down into canals. The buildings surrounding the fountain was very colorful, with tan or peach color for the walls and roofs of the houses which are many times red and semicircular. Marvelous. Brooke gasped out in awe. I don't know what to say. Home sweet home. Frankie laughed out, feeling a sense of happiness that he missed. The memory straw hats were all amazed, staring around as they went right up front, and to their surprise, several people gave them direction to head right down the backstreet entrances. No one seemed the least bit worried that there were pirates in town. But they were busy looking at the city, heading down the canals and waterways that were surrounded by sidewalks and buildings. There were boats of all sizes covering the canals, and there were ramps of water that they were traveling along like streets. This place is amazing, Brooke said in wonder. I know, it's great, Usopp said excitedly. But aren't they worried about flooding? Brooke asked them, staring at all the water. Not at all, Frankie said. See, every year, the water level rises. Water 7 has gotten used to it, but have been forced to build on top of each other as the foundation has ended up going underwater. I guess I should say that it's not like the water level is rising, more like the island is starting to sink. I'm not worried though. Iceberg had some pretty crafty ideas to how to change that by the time I left. Did a lot happen here or what? Chopper asked them grinning. But why is everyone so calm about pirates coming? Brooke asked as another man pointed down to a shortcut for them. I mean, when pirates come to town, don't they usually panic? They don't have any reason to, Frankie said. We don't need Marines, the security here has always been enough to keep pirates under control. In fact, they get a lot of business from pirates, when they're smart enough to pay that is. What do you mean by that? Chopper asked him in confusion. You honestly think that most pirates are gonna pay for something? Usopp asked him. Once the shipwrights are done, they're probably thinking that they can just threaten them and then leave without giving up a single berry. Fat chance of that happening, Frankie said smugly. After sailing around the backstreets for a short time, the Straw Hats ended up coming to the outskirts of the city and anchored at a small cape. Everyone was thrilled at the thought of going in and were impatient to get going, but as Memory Zoro was pulling up the sails on the mast, just as he pulled to tighten it, to everyone's horror, the mast snapped almost right in half and he was forced to grab hold of it to keep it from falling. What happened? Brooke cried out. The others screamed at him, Memory Usopp loudest of them all, are you trying to break the ship? No, Memory Zoro gasped, just as surprised as the rest of them. All I did was pull the rope like I always do. And with a great heave, he began to stand it upright once again. Holy crap, he cursed, after they heard the loud creaking sound of the wood. If the Mary's falling apart this easy, we're lucky we made it here at all. No kidding, Kurad Nami said. I mean, imagine if that happened out at sea. We'd be dead in the water for sure. Her past self frowned in worry up at the mast before she turned back to the others and said, by the way, they aren't scared of pirates here, are they? Don't you think that's kinda strange? That's cause we're shipyard customers just like everyone else. Memory Zoro grunted as he continued to push the mast, not needing Usopp there hitting him and telling him to put it upright. What did you think I was doing? Zoro snarled at him, I didn't do it on purpose, you know. Do you know how hard I worked on Mary to keep her from sinking? He retorted back, and it wouldn't be the first time you broke something when you didn't know your own strength. Shut up, he snapped back. They probably aren't concerned about pirates because they have enough security to deal with them if they misbehave, Memory Robin offered and Sanji grinned at that. Bet there's plenty of Marines here too, he said eagerly, comes with the territory huh? Job hazard of being a pirate, present-day Nami said with a shrug. But at their words, Memory Usopp looked close to freaking out. What are you kidding me? He yelled out, you mean they're gonna have us arrested? I don't think that's a problem since we're paying customers and all, Memory Sanji pointed out and they calmed down at once. That's true, Frankie sighed, so long as you behave and pay for the work, the shipwrights won't be bothered. His bros though, they were a different story. Now comforted that they didn't have to worry, Luffy and Usopp were the first to jump ship, but before they could run off, past Nami called them back, telling them that they were to come with her so that they could cash in their gold and get a look at the shipyard, and that was where the memory faded. So what did you all do when they told you Lam Chan's condition? Brooke asked. It's Mary, Usopp said, unable to look at them, and, not well at all. Usopp. Chopper asked nervously. It's all history now, Zoro said darkly, it all happened years ago, you learned from it and we moved on. That's all that matters. I know, Usopp stuttered as he picked at the grass around him in a moody sort of way. But still, that doesn't mean that I'm proud of it. What are you talking about? Brooke asked, noticing the tense looks on all their faces. No one seemed willing to answer him for a moment. Let's just say, Sanji said, the last of the cigarette dying out and he was forced to toss it. Usopp didn't agree with the captain's decision and a lot of words that they didn't mean were shared. Brooke didn't like how he said that, but seeing how uncomfortable everyone was made him think that whatever happened couldn't have been a good thing. He fell silent, looking forward to when he came into these memories so that he didn't have to be left in the dark about this anymore. In the newest memory, they were somewhere in the city where people were coming and going all around them. They smiled at the boats coming up and down the canals, being pulled by some of the strangest looking creatures they've seen yet. They looked and acted like horses as they pulled the boats, and they informed Brook that they were called Yagara bulls. Soon though, the three were coming out of a large building behind them, each of them carrying large black cases. I don't feel comfortable having all this money in one place, guys, Memory Usopp said nervously, hugging his case tightly to his chest. It's scary. I mean, what if I trip and it all falls out or something? The current Usopp sighed, if only that had been his only worry. That was great. Luffy laughed, swinging his case around. You sure were scary back there, Nami. I estimated 300 million from the start, she answered with a smile. 300 million. Brook called in shock. That's a fortune. I know, the jerk in charge of this place wanted to give us only 100 million and I convinced him otherwise. 300 million, it was nice while it lasted, Nami sighed, the memory of throwing all that money up in the air when they traded the gold in. But we ended up using up all of it in just a week. She glared at the boys who stepped back from her in fear of being beaten. Like I said, she snarled, the money will from now on be carefully monitored by me. Any complaints, boys? None at all, they all recited at once as Brook looked confused and Robin laughed. But I figured that he wouldn't give it up easy, Memory Nami said, you really gotta work on your game face. She looked back smugly, good thing I was there. Cut it out. Memory Usopp hissed to Luffy, glancing around, you're making me nervous swinging that around. Well, whatever, Luffy said happily, we got our money now and that's all that matters. But at those words, he accidentally ended up letting the case go and it went flying out over the canal. At that, the other two screamed in horror and actually went jumping over, ready to catch it. But as they were about to grab it, Luffy stretched out and snatched it back. Phew, he called, that would have been bad if the money got wet, huh? That jerk, Nami hissed as she watched the two of them fall into the water. And when they climbed out, they gave him a hard beating for doing that, promising that if he lost that money he would be paying in blood. Yo-ho-ho-ho, how harsh. Brook laughed. The two of them are scary when they gang up like that, Chopper thought nervously as Luffy promised that he'd be more careful if they would just stop hurting him. After that, Nami gave Luffy's case to Usopp and they got into their boats, and let their Yagaras pull them along. They followed after them, Usopp staring around nervously with his hands wrapped around the black cases. You really shouldn't do that, Robin said, if you keep acting like something valuable is in there, people are bound to notice. That's like begging someone to try and take it. Now you tell me, he muttered disgracefully as Luffy pouted at how far away they were choosing to stay away from him. I don't know, Nami, Memory Usopp whimpered behind her, maybe we should have taken the money back to the ship after all. That'd be a complete waste of time. She retorted, the shipyard is right around the corner. Now that I know what happened, it might have been better to do that, present-day Nami muttered with a nasty look at Frankie. Hey, for the last time, we all worked things out right. He asked them all. I mean, if things didn't happen the way that they did, we wouldn't be riding the Sunny now, would we? Can someone tell me what this is about? Brook asked in frustration. The money was stolen, Usopp said, still miserable. That's all you need to know for now. Brook looked ready to continue talking, but Luffy was moaning from his Yagara, come on. You don't have to ride so far away. Let me play with the money. Money isn't something that you can play with like that. Current Nami hissed to herself. Honestly though, if we let him have it, he'd go off and spend it all on food and that stupid statue he's always wanted. Anyway, the current Nami went on as if she hadn't heard him moan, we'll probably be heading back to the Mary soon enough. After we'll meet with the shipwrights. They'll probably need to look at the damages before they can give us a quote. I didn't think of it that way, Memory Usopp said smiling, I guess I can look after the money until then. I've never carried this much cash at once, that's all. I don't know how to handle it. I should have let Luffy handle it, Usopp muttered darkly. And you could keep threatening him, Nami. Who knows what could have happened if we gave it to him, Sanji sighed, stop it already. I thought we were over this. Usopp nodded, but it was hard to remember that as they soon sailed onto the large steel door marked with the number 1. They could see and hear people working in there, moving large lumber, rolling cannons, and raising up sails. The sounds of hammers and saws were constantly going, they could see the forms of ships, all the way from just a pile of boards and nails to halfway finished ships, and even some already done. It was very impressive as they all stepped forward to get a look at it. The three past selves climbed out of the boat and began looking around for Iceberg, at least until they realized that they didn't have a clue to who he was or how to find him, they didn't even know what he looked like. Naturally however, Luffy was just gonna waltz right in and ask, but as he began to climb over the fence, someone came out of nowhere and stopped him. Oh no, Zoro sighed, recognizing that voice. Him, you know him? Brook asked in surprise. Hold it right there, the man said, a single finger to Luffy's forehead and pushing him back. You've got a lot of gumption just waltzing in like that. Why don't we take a step over here and then we can talk? He raised his head, don't worry. It's not personal. You're outsiders is all, so you're not allowed inside the plant. But they hardly heard anything else that he said as they stared at his face. He had big black eyes and a long nose so similar to Usopp that they looked like they might have been related, only his nose was rectangular in shape. He climbed over the little fence and walked over to them, dressed in simple workman's clothes and a tool belt at his belt. "All right, champ," he said casually, as if they were old friends, "what brings you to the docks today?" "Come on Usopp, I know it's you," Luffy said with a smile, with the Usopp next to him smacking at him, reminding him that he was right there. It was just so funny, the current Nami said as her past self came out of her shock and began asking him about Iceberg. "That it took us so long, remember that. Thanks a lot," Usopp said to them in annoyance as they laughed. "But who is this guy?" Brook asked. "His name is Kaku," Zoro said, "and don't let, nice guy, act fool you. He's dangerous." "Danger," Brook began, but then Kaku was looking surprised by the request and was asking them if they were customers before Memory Nami held out Kokura's letter. "Oh, that's nifty," Kaku said reading it, "not every day that youngsters come here with a letter of introduction from Granny Kokura." "Youngsters," Chopper repeated in confusion, "but he doesn't look old at all," Brook said in confusion. Luffy seemed to notice this as well, and rather bluntly asked how old he was. "I'm 23, why do you ask?" Kaku asked politely. "You know, for someone who's hardly any older than us, you sure do talk like an old man," Memory Usopp couldn't stop himself from saying. Rather than be offended, Kaku just laughed and answered, "I get that a lot." "So do you know Iceberg or did we come to wrong place?" Memory Nami asked and Kaku told them a little more about his boss. How he was the mayor of Water 7 as well as the CEO of the Galila Company and manager of the Sea Train the Puffing Tom. "I forgot about how important he was here," Sanji stated coolly. "He sure made a name for himself," Frankie agreed. "He created it all, from the ground up with his own 2 hands on his own terms. Iceberg is a lot of thing, but he gets to work when he puts his mind to it." Kaku then confessed that because he's always so busy, finding him can be difficult at times, so he offered to go and look over their ship for them himself. After putting his tool belt down and asking them where their ship was moored at, he went running off, and literally at that. He was amazing, running and jumping right over the edge, practically flying through the air. "Impressive," Brook said cheerfully, but he was sure that he could have made that jump as well. However, more importantly, why was everyone looking at him like they expected them to start killing people? He seemed a nice enough guy. Then again, he knew that first appearances were often deceiving, he just hoped that he wouldn't regret asking. The 3 Memory Straw Hats looked freaked out at seeing him go over the wall until a calm voice behind them spoke up, "Don't worry. He's always soaring through town." Everyone turned around to see 2 people standing there, a man and a young woman. "Ice for brains," Frankie smirked. "Man, never thought I'd miss that ugly mug of his." He was a rather tall man with blue hair and dark lips and a faint beard starting to grow in. He was wearing a red and orange striped jacket where he was caressing the little head of a small white mouse from his front pocket. Standing next to him was a slim, pretty woman with blue eyes and glasses, with her long blonde hair tied up in a bun at the back of her head. "Khalifa," Nami said, her eyes narrowing. "Ooh," Brook said happily, "such a lovely lady. I wonder if she'd let me see her panties." "Believe me, she'd kill you," Sanji said firmly. He would know, she almost ended up killing him. Iceberg then finished speaking to them. "They call him the Mountain Wind. If you didn't know, he the Galley Law's Dock 1 carpentry foreman, Kaku." Zoro knew better than anyone how he earned that nickname, for more ways than one. He was a strong swordsman, if annoying since he kept underestimating him until he ended up tasting his swords, that is. But he did have some honor, he'll give him that much. It's a shame that a swordsman of his skills had to turn to be some low-life killer for the world government. "You know something?" Sanji stated as he looked in the direction that Kaku went off in. "While I was shopping, I saw him jump over me. For a second there I thought it was you, Usopp. Just because we both have long noses doesn't mean I look like him." Usopp yelled. "Don't know, I can see the resemblance," Chopper stated as Sanji started to frown again. Now that he thought about it, it was just before he saw Kaku jumping overhead did he see Robin disappear with that guy in the mask. He sighed, not looking forward to seeing all this again. "Geez, that was a big surprise," Memory Usopp sighed in relief, knowing that guy was alright. "I've never seen someone jump that far before," Luffy said in awe. "Please, I could jump twice that far," Sanji whispered to himself. "Well," Iceberg said, trying not to sound smug, "my craftsmen are the best in the business for a reason." There was some silence between them before Luffy whispered to Usopp, "Who is this guy?" "Don't ask me," he answered back. "Extraordinary ships are not born from ordinary circumstances," Iceberg continued, as he looked over them all. "They require nearly a superhuman level of skill." Frankie smirked at one of Tom's philosophies being recited. Iceberg then turned Khalifa and asked, "By the way, Khalifa." "I've already finished the background check," Khalifa answered him, adjusting her glasses before she began to read from a clipboard. "The one in the middle is Straw Hat Luffy. His crew also includes Pirate Hunter Zoro and Nico Robin." Most people didn't notice the change, but some of them spotted it on Iceberg's face, a slight look of anxiety and surprise. However, it passed quickly as she went on to read. "Their combined bounties are 239 million. They have 4 others currently without bounties and their crew was formed in the East Blue. Named after their captain, they're known simply as the Straw Hat Pirates. They sure did have our number, didn't they? Usopp mumbled while his past self was looking freaked at how they knew all this information on them before they even introduced themselves. She always did, and now I know how, Frankie muttered under his breath. Of course they would have as much information on them as possible if she worked for the government. I see, welcome, my name is Iceberg, Iceberg said, sounding a little impressed as he continued to bet the little mouse. I'm the boss here, and this is a mouse I just picked up. His name is, let's see, Tyrannosaurs. I'll need some rodent food and a cage. Tyrannosaurs, Zoro said, eyebrows raised, really? Big name for such a little guy. Usopp nodded as Khalifa already informed Iceberg that she had already taken the liberty of ordering those for him. She's really good, Brooke said impressed as Iceberg complimented her on doing that before he even asked her to. She's worked with him for about 5 years, so I guess she would know what he thinks, Frankie shrugged. How could they have worked with someone all these years and not feel anything for them? All this time they worked alongside each other and they go and try to kill him and so many others. Just what was the problem with these guys? Robin glanced at Iceberg with sadness in her eyes. She knew that many people hated her, fearing her ability to awaken the ancient weapon. Iceberg was a good example of one of them, and she felt guilt once more at the thought of how she was forced to hurt him as she did, but at the time, she didn't think she had another choice. Speaking of which, Khalifa, looking back at her notes, she began to list all the things that he had to do today. Such as a lunch meeting with an hotel in Chizo with the glassware executive, then after that he was set to make a speech at the Liguria Square, followed by a meeting with the mayor from Pucci and give an interview before he was to overlook some paperwork when he got back to the office. Wow, does this guy have a busy schedule or what? Sanji muttered to them impressed. Please, Frankie laughed. Iceberg does what he wants. And this was proven true when Iceberg whined out, like a kid who was told to go to bed early, I don't wanna. Khalifa didn't seem the least bit surprised as she began crossing them off the list and said casually, very well, I will cancel everything here for you. Frankie burst out laughing as Memory Usopp yelled out, hold on. You're not serious, are you? That's right, Frankie said beaming. He does what he wants to. Believe me, he hates following orders unless they're from someone he respects. Something common with Utom's workers. Nami asked knowingly and he beamed with pride. What can I say? He asked, guilty as charged. What's the point in having power if I don't get to do what I want? Iceberg asked them calmly. Good point there, Zoro said as Chopper giggled next to him. I mean, it's not like he's hurting anyone here, is he? If that's how you run things, you gotta be the most irresponsible mayor in the world. Memory Usopp informed him. Yeah pops, that's pretty lazy, Luffy said. That's rich coming from you, Luffy, Nami said with a roll of her eyes as he turned to look at her past self and asked her, you sure this is the guy that old lady was talking about? Aha, he's the guy alright, Memory Nami stated, but at those words, Khalifa suddenly charged and began kicking them all so fast that they didn't realize what had happened until it was all over. How dare you? What's her problem? Zoro yelled as they were forced to duck from her kicks. She's got issues, Nami stated, remembering what a pain she was to fight. What's the big idea, lady? Luffy shouted at her angrily as Memory Nami and Usopp were both trying to recover from the shock. Funny enough, Luffy and Nami appeared to be just fine, but it was Usopp who seemed to be the one who had taken the hits and was now on the ground with a dented face. Ow, Sanji said sympathetically, knowing firsthand how hard that woman can kick. I won't stand here and let you insolent louts and insult one of the world's leading ship engineers. Khalifa told them all angrily, pushing her glasses back up her face. Funny, but weren't you one of the ones who tried to kill him? Frankie thought bitterly to himself. What a hypocrite. She didn't have to hit me that hard, current Usopp whimpered at the memory. Why did everyone want to try and break his nose? Thanks to Khalifa losing her temper, several citizens in the area heard what was going on and began to draw a crowd. Noticing this, she seemed to remember where she was before she apologized. Pardon me, I get a bit carried away from time to time. Still, Iceberg is a respected figure here in Water 7, so try to show some courtesy. I don't see how they were being rude by calling him, that guy, or anything, Brooke said. Besides, if there's anyone who needs to learn some courtesy, it's her, Nami said angrily. Why is that? Brooke asked. They all looked to him as Usopp said, Brooke, it's kinda hard to explain but. However, before he could tell him the truth, Iceberg was speaking again. Yes, please don't provoke, Khalifa. When she lashes out in anger, Iceberg warned, and when they looked they could see that he was covered with lumps and bruised like a banana, tears of pain were even in his eyes. She doesn't discriminate. Ouch, Zoro stated with a smirk. What she says and what she does are two completely different things. Chopper cried out in shock. Don't worry about him, Frankie said, sharing a look with Robin. Ice for brains is a lot tougher than you know. It's gonna take a lot more than a few kicks to the face to kill him off. Memory Usopp then yelled at outrage, we might have hurt his feelings, but you hurt his face. You're way meaner than us. Luffy added in equal outrage. In more ways than one, Nami nodded as her past self said suddenly, putting all that behind us, if you're Iceberg then you're the man we're looking for. She took out Kokura's letter and handed it to him. Here, we brought a letter of introduction for you to look at. Iceberg carefully took it from her and read it out. From Granny Kokura. Take a look at the ship, it says. He nodded in understanding before he tore the paper to shreds. What was that for? Chopper yelled in shock. He didn't think that Iceberg would do that, he seemed so nice to them. Don't worry, Usopp sighed, it wasn't that he didn't want to fix the ship. It was because. What? Are you serious? Memory Nami exclaimed startled. There has to be something we can do to change your mind. She held up a black case so that he couldn't hope to miss it. If money's the issue, we can pay. If you're really the best then you gotta be the one to fix our Mary. Luffy pleaded with him, come on, we're begging. Okay, Iceberg answered casually. What? Chopper asked, falling over. It was that easy. All you had to do was ask, Robin commented with a little laugh. That's it. Memory Usopp yelled at him, looking ready to fall over as well like how Chopper did, you don't even need to think about it. No, Iceberg said disinterestedly. Then why did you tear up the letter? He demanded hotly. The lipstick mark was creeping me out, he answered as if it was obvious. Oh, well, in that case I understand, Zoro stated as the men all nodded with him. Do you guys have to be so rude? Nami demanded. So what if she wasn't beautiful? Geez, these guys and their stupid thoughts about how all mermaids should look like. She doesn't care, Frankie said with a shrug. She doesn't give a damn about what anything thinks about her. But she was like a mom to me. A lot like Dayton I guess. He offered, thinking it over. Come to think of it, I think Dayton and Kokura would get along pretty well. Well, they both like to drink, Nami offered, and had years of looking after some of the biggest troublemakers who ever lived, so I guess they would have a lot in common. Even so, Granny Kokura and I have been drinking buddies for years, Iceberg explained. Well, and since Kaku has already gone to make an estimate for me it would seem like a waste to turn you down now, wouldn't you say? He stretched out his arms and even began to pick his nose in boredom. Besides, it's not like I had anything else to do, I'll show you around the shipyard, sound good? Well, I don't think he would have anything else to do today since he cancelled everything, Sanji stated. Hasn't changed a bit since we were kids, Frankie stated knowingly. But some of the Straw Hats were frowning, not having a good feeling about this. And it wasn't until Memory Usopp said it did they figure out what the problem was. Did he serious cancel all of his meetings just to give us a tour? He asked. Now that you mention it, I think he did, Sanji stated darkly. Why is that? Robin looked down, knowing it was because he had heard her name. Did he do that? Wanting to know if he was true most likely. Luffy happily began to follow Iceberg and Khalifa into the shipyard, but as they were getting closer, they heard Nami's voice screaming out behind them, did you drop it somewhere? I don't know. Past Usopp yelled out, sounding terrified, and they all turned around to see the two there, staring around wildly. Just then Past Usopp pointed out towards the water, and when they followed their gaze, on a couple Yagaras, there were a few men wearing some of the strangest outfits they could think of. Some kind of roundish, metal lederhosen with a pink star on it that they wore like overalls, as well as covered in tattoos and specialized goggles. At the sight of them, Frankie burst out sobbing. Bros. My bros. I miss you. Your brothers. Brook asked in surprise. Not by blood, Zoro told him over the loud sobs coming from Frankie. They apparently were the misfits of Water 7 and Frankie took them in. Just like one big happy family, Frankie sobbed, wiping the tears away. Well, your family was stealing our money. Nami yelled at him. Memory Usopp realized this as well. Wait, he yelled after them angrily. WHO or you? Why are you taking our money? Give it back, we need it, you jerks. Do you hear me? Thanks for the cash. One the men mocked. Those are my boys, Frankie sniffled like a proud parent, and Nami hit him over the head. Shut up, don't you realize the kind of trouble you put us through because of that? She yelled as Memory Usopp was now chasing after the boat on the sidewalk. She breathed hard as she added, I mean, you saw what we had to go through because of all that, right? We earned that money fair and square. Hey, how were we supposed to know that? He demanded. I thought you were just another bunch of pirates who stole it from other people, that's all. So that's how you met? Brook asked them. Talk about a bad first impression. You don't know the half of it. Chopper sniffled a little, wondering if this was where they had their money stolen from them for good and where Usopp. He shook his head, not wanting to think about that, as Past Usopp was still running after them, looking ready to jump into the canal and swim up to them. But when Luffy caught up to him and asked him why he gave the money to them, Usopp was yelling at him for that, telling him that they stole it. What an idiot, what else did he think happened? Nami asked bitterly. However, just as Luffy was about to go after the money himself, a man jumped from the bridge directly above them. He had blonde hair that was slicked back in a pair of orange goggles, as well as having a cigar in his mouth. He wore a flame-detailed denim jacket with cigars strapped to it like how Smoker wore his. As he jumped, a set of ropes came out from his sleeves, and using them like whips, he was able to knock the Frankie family right into the river. Hey! Frankie yelled furiously after him, Polly. I'll remember that. A friend of yours? Brooke asked. He works for Iceberg, he retorted, one of his shipwrights. He looked up and saw several men in suits yelling after him. He's got a gambling problem, so he's forced to run from debt collectors at least once a week. Good memories. Really? Chopper asked, but he did save the money here. However, if this was what happened, then how did the money get stolen from them? Before he could ask, they were all calling after him, Usopp thanking him for getting their money back. However, as soon as Polly heard the word money and looked at the cases, his face brightened and he was the one sailing off this time. Probably not the best idea letting him know what was in it, Robin pointed out as Usopp sighed. Don't worry, Frankie said, waving his massive hand around. Polly may be an idiot, but he means well. Of course, with that much money anyone would go crazy with greed. You would know, Nami muttered bitterly. I think you're being robbed a second time, Brooke pointed out. That jackass, Sanji muttered as memory. Usopp also noticed this. You got to be kidding me, he groaned out. Hey. Get back here. Finally tired of waiting, Luffy held his fist up, ready to stretch out and grab him himself, although just as he was about to stretch out, someone stopped him. They all looked and everyone but Brooke felt chills going up their spines at the sight of him. A very tall and slim, yet muscular man with arched eyebrows and a close-shaved goatee was standing there. He had a shoulder-length wavy hair, and a large black top hat on his head that seemed to clash with the Kozil workman clothes he was wearing. His face held no emotion as the white pigeon, wearing a light red tie, on his shoulder spoke up. I'll get your money back, he said in a rough voice. Did that pigeon just talk? Brooke gasped out as Chopper's jaw fell open. Since when can he do that? He asked, unable to know what to say as he watched the man go running off. He can't really, Frankie said with a frown. That's Rob Lucci. In the whole time that he's been here, he's never talked to the other shipwrights. At least not that I know. What? Why? Brooke asked in surprise. He's a monster, Robin said softly. She had learned a little more about CP9 over the last few years and had discovered several disturbing things about Lucci. He uses this as guise to cover his true emotion. Why can't anyone tell me what's going on? Brooke asked desperately as Luffy stared at him in surprise before Lucci went running off. He's an assassin from the world government sent here to kill Iceberg. Zoro offered and Brooke stopped talking and gaped at him. Nice job, Moss Head, Sanji muttered, nice and direct. What? Someone had to tell him, Zoro stated. Not just him, but that Kaku and the secretary were also trained killers. Along with Blueneo, Frankie added sourly, he was the barman of my favorite bar. Brooke seemed too stunned to speak as they told him that they were their enemies since they declared war on the world government and for them trying to kill Robin. They thought that they were good people at first, but after they threatened Robin, tried to kill Iceberg and pin blame on them, as well as destroying Galila headquarters, they found out the hard truth. But why? Brooke gasped. Why would they do this? Like we said before, Frankie sighed, they wanted Robin and use her to awaken the weapons. And they thought that Iceberg had something they wanted. Blueprints. Did I mention this before? They wanted the blueprints for a weapon. But these guys here were known as CP9. They were undercover here in Water 7 for years, hoping for a chance to get their hands on it. Screw them, Iceberg didn't have them. CP9. Brooke repeated, trying to remember the logbook on the Sunny, he was sure he read that name somewhere before. It stands for Cipher Pull Number 9, Robin answered, her eyes narrowed darkly. It's a secret organization. There are several official Cipher police groups, but CP9 is different since no one is supposed to know about it. Why not? Chopper asked. They're assassins, aren't they? Zoro asked with disdain, would be kinda hard if the world knew who you were if you tried to go undercover. That's exactly true, Robin sighed, they are a group of assassins who kill anyone who opposes the world government. From what I know about it, Lucci was the most powerful member in CP9's history. That's the man who went to get the money back? Brooke asked, looking back at Khalifa, suddenly understanding why everyone was looking at her and Kaku with such dark looks. That's right, Sanji said, and he wasn't normal. He and Luffy almost ended up killing each other in a battle to the death back at Enies lobby. Luffy had to push himself beyond his limits to beat him. Just barely, Usopp shivered, remembering seeing all the blood that Luffy was covered in when he tried to reach out to him. You don't know the half of it, Robin said. They looked to her, and were about to ask what she was talking about when they heard yelling. They looked up to see that the boat was coming back with Lucci there, holding onto Polly's ear like a child who had severely misbehaved and his mother was hauling up to bed. Ow, 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 ow. Okay, you can let me go. Polly yelled, let me go. Take it easy, geez. I'm not gonna run away. You got me. Alright, you can stop pinching my ear now. He added as he pushed Lucci away from him and nursed his red ear, ow. I was lucky enough to find that money and you screw it up. Better watch your back, Lucci, I'll remember this. Don't pay back your debt with somebody else's money, you idiot. The pigeon said, have you no shame? No, he really doesn't, Frankie said knowingly. Hey, I happened upon that money fair and square. Polly yelled. No you didn't. Usopp yelled out, wishing that he could give him a piece of his mind, you stole it from us. Stealing from thieves is still stealing. Baka, the pigeon said as Lucci grabbed him by the ear again. I didn't steal anything, I was just borrowing their Yagara for a while. He retorted. Sure, and then you stole it once you saw how much money was in there, Zoro stated, shaking his head. Who does he think he's kidding? Looks like they're back, Iceberg answered next to them. Luffy sighed in relief, saying how happy he was for Usopp. At those words, past Usopp and Nami began to pull his cheeks out, snapping at him that was their 200 million to fix the Mary. In memory Nami demanded to know why he didn't get it back himself and Luffy just answered that the pigeon said that he'd take care of it. And how did you know that you could trust a pigeon even if he could talk? Nami demanded. If it wasn't the pigeon then how was he talking? Chopper asked with a whine. You'll see, Usopp sighed. Well, Iceberg said as he held the little mouse in his hands for a moment before he slipped him back into his breast pocket. That was embarrassing. Rest assured we will deal with our employee appropriately. Allow us to handle this so that there is no bad blood between you. He's professional, I'll give him that, Sanji shrugged. Although Polly's behavior was apprehensible, Khalifa added, it's fortunate he saved your money from the Frankie family. At least they had control over Polly and his job, Nami sighed, your men on the other hand Frankie. Ah, they mean well, he said, beaming with pride. They sure are tough as nails though. Well, I guess you can look at it that way, memory Nami nodded thoughtfully. No harm done, right? Luffy said and the two of them finally let go of Luffy's stretched out cheeks and let him fall to the ground. But memory Nami had more important things to talk about. She turned back to Iceberg and Khalifa, asking them, so who is this Frankie family? Did they rob from everyone they run into, or just us? Well, that depends, Khalifa said, pushing her glasses back up, but normally, they dismantle ships. Taking things apart is what they do best, Frankie said proudly. You mean they're workmen? Nami asked in surprise as Luffy stood up. I don't know about you but I'd never hire a team that looks like that. Hey, what's wrong with the way they look? Frankie demanded. Did they look like reliable friend people? She retorted. No. However, Khalifa and Iceberg explained that the Frankie family were a public nuisance, that they dismantled ships for a living but were also bounty hunters. Whenever they hear that pirates were in town, they go after them and try to collect the bounties on their heads. After that, they take their ships, dismantle them, and then sell them on the black market. Though underhanded, it's just good business to them, and Iceberg finished by warning them that if they catch them, they'll bleed them dry. Geez, don't hold back on telling me how you feel ice for brains, Frankie muttered under his breath. I don't know, Luffy said with a smile, those guys look too weak to do anything to us. Iceberg gently petted the mouse's head before he said softly, the men you saw were underlings. Frankie, the leader of the group, is not nearly so harmless. If I were you, I'd avoid him at any cost. Thanks, I think, Frankie muttered. But he resented that he called his boys his underlings. They weren't his subordinates, they were his bros. Come on, they were all failures and rejects of Water 7. He, himself, was a failure so he could understand them and gave them a purpose. They may be rough around the edges, but you can't find more loyal people anywhere. The two had just got back and were getting out of the boat, with Lucci carrying the two cases in one hand, and dragging Polly over by his ear in the other one. Harsh, but it gets the job done, yo-ho-ho-ho, Brooke said with a laugh. Here you are, Iceberg. The pigeon said when they got up to him, do with him as you will. I'm here, you can let go, Polly yelled, finally getting himself free from Lucci's grasp as Iceberg complimented him on his good work. Truly, the pigeon said to the three straw hats, I can't apologize enough for the actions of this oaf. Coo-coo. Ah, Luffy yelled, eyes wide in shock, it is talking. Lucci threw Polly on the ground and tossed him the cases. Tell the nice people you're sorry, oaf. This is so weird watching a trash-talking pigeon, Sanji said softly. I kinda like it, Chopper laughed. But how is he talking? It's a ventriloquism act isn't it? Robin asked, Lucci is the one talking. Really? Chopper asked in amazement. He's just throwing his voice around and making it look like the bird brain's talking, Frankie said. I never did like him, he always gave me the creeps. Glad to know that my instincts were right about him. That pigeon really has it out for that dude doesn't he? Luffy gasped, pointing to the bird and then to Polly on the ground. So the little bird talk, but the guy doesn't. Memory Usopp asked in bewilderment before he smiled. Anyway, I'm just glad that we got all our money back. Oh, Polly said, getting up and walking over to them with the cases to them, so this money belongs to you huh? Don't act like you didn't know, Sanji said in annoyance as Polly passed them into Luffy's arms, good thing I was around. Yeah, Luffy agreed, thanks a lot. Polly put his hands on his shoulders and told him, if you really wanna thank me, give me 10%. Not gonna happen, Nami said and almost glad to see Lucci hit him over the head with a hammer and added, again, I'm quite sorry. The pigeon went on to tell them that Polly had a gambling problem and was in so much debt, he lost sight of everything but money. At those words, Polly lost his temper and began to fight him. After Lucci's pet pigeon got out of the way, the rope wrapped around Lucci's arm and when he pulled, he swung him around like a ball and chain. Lucci was able to stop his head getting slammed into the cement with his arm, his fingers digging into the ground and holding him up as straight as an arrow. The fight ended soon after that, and the Straw Hats found out about Lucci's ventriloquism act with his bird Hattori. Luffy and Usopp were especially impressed and were applauding him as Polly seemed to calm down enough to start laughing again. "He's just a weirdo who doesn't know how to talk to people on his own," he said as he pulled out a cigar. "Like you're one to talk about being a weirdo, bro," Frankie laughed. But then Polly spotted Nami and freaked out. "Hold on a second," he shouted out, turning red and pointing a finger at her. "What does that woman think she's doing? What are you doing that's so bad?" Robin asked as she sighed back. "Let's just say, unlike some people I could mention, he's got problems with how I dress," she said. Her past self looked confused and asked what he was talking about as he yelled out, "Have you no shame?" And when she continued to look confused he added, "Don't play dumb with me you harlot. I can see WAAAAY to much leg. Cover up and show a little decency would ya? This place is a man's workplace you know." "Harlot," Sanji demanded. "What's wrong with the way that Nami Swan dresses?" "Yo-ho-ho-ho, that outfit is modest for you Nami-san," Brook added and she hit them both over the head. Khalifa stepped in front of Nami, trying to calm Polly down, but he freaked out when he saw her as well. "You too Khalifa," he yelled as Lucci grabbed his arm to stop him from doing something stupid. "How many times have I told you those clothes of yours are not appropirate? If you wanna look professional, you should wear pants. Or at least ankle-length skirts. This guy's got issues," Memory Usopp whispered. "I'm with ya there," Sanji muttered through the dirt where Nami had hit him. "He's serious isn't he?" Nami asked them and they only shrugged alone with her as Iceberg told them to come with him. After everything was said and done, they opened the door and Iceberg began to show them around the yard, all of them staring around in amazement at every little thing they could see. Watching the hustle and bustle of the shipwrights working, seeing the ship being built from the ground up was truly an amazing sight to see. And it wasn't just the Memory Straw Hats who were amazed, but even those who had been here before were taken aback by how amazing the yard was. Iceberg gave them a tour, everyone was glad to see him and Khalifa explained that there had been several shipbuilding companies, and about 5 years ago, they all united under him as Galila. Luffy even offered for Iceberg to join, which he politely refused, but told him that they had plenty of shipwrights, and though he doubted any of them would be willing to join a pirate crew, if they found someone, he wouldn't get in the way. "Well, he's agreeable isn't he?" Brook asked them. "He can be when he wants to," Frankie stated. "And we had to find a pervert cyborg to be our shipwright didn't we?" Nami sighed with a shake of her head. "That's enough, you don't have to be so nice," Frankie laughed. "Being called a pervert isn't a compliment. When are you gonna learn that?" Sanji demanded. "By the way," Iceberg mentioned to Luffy after a short time, "Khalifa mentioned that Nico Robin was part of your crew, is that correct?" Robin sighed at those words, but her heart felt warm again from Luffy's words. "Sure is," he confirmed, "she's nice to have around since she's so smart." But then he noticed the serious look on Iceberg's face and the smile faded from his own. "What's up?" he asked. "There's not something wrong with her is there?" "Oh no," Iceberg said suddenly, and though he did a good job of hiding it, they could see the lie in his eyes. However Luffy seemed to buy that as he went running over to look and climb up some of the ships. "Why do I get the feeling that he was lying?" Chopper asked, frowning. "It's just that he heard about my ability to awaken the weapons and he disapproved of me," Robin stated. "Robin," Usopp said worriedly, but she just smiled. "I know," she smiled. "I know." They looked on for a few minutes until they heard past Nami yelling up at Luffy to get down from the large galleon that he was walking around on. "Okay. Be right there," Luffy yelled as he jumped down and landed light on his feet next to them all. But he frowned a little as he looked around and asked Nami where Usopp was. At those words, Usopp sighed miserably, knowing that it had to be right around here that he was robbed. He just wanted to curl up and cry at that. How could he be so stupid as to lose all that money? The others looked at him sadly as Memory Nami exclaimed that the last time she saw him was when he was looking at the cannons. As they looked in the direction, one of the shipwrights spotted them. "Hey, you there," he called to them and walked over. "These bags are yours right?" It was true, he was carrying the 2 black cases with him. He put it down next to the other one and Nami looked angry as she said that Usopp was supposed to be taking care of those. Luffy thanked him as Nami looked around again for Usopp in frustration about leaving their money behind. The shipwright looked surprised and Luffy told them that the 2 bags he found had 200 million in them. The shipwright laughed, as if he thought for sure that they were pulling his leg before he left and Luffy waved after him in a friendly way. "Why do I have a bad feeling about this?" Sanji sighed, knowing the answer to what must have happened. Frankie coughed awkwardly, not daring to say anything as Memory Nami looked startled at the laughing shipwright but seemed to let it go. "So," Luffy said, turning back to the others, going back to the matter at hand, "how much do you think the repairs are gonna cost? We got plenty of money to spend." And he patted each bag fondly. "No price is too high for our Mary." Usopp cringed at those words as Kaku went to sit down on a large pyramid of lumber, acting like bleachers. And while you're at it, Luffy added, why don't you make her stronger, faster, tough as nails and of course, decked out with cannons. As nice as it sounds, Frankie sighed, unable to go on, everyone knowing that the bad news was coming. I'd like some pretty engravings or some kind of decorations along the hull, Memory Nami added eagerly. Also, can you guys renovate the inside? They better tell you guys soon before you get too carried away with ideas, Brook said sadly, his non-existing heart going out to them. I know, but I wasn't prepared to hear it, Nami sighed as they continued to go on with their suggestions before Kaku interrupted them. Not so fast, he said, his expression unusually grim, and Luffy and Nami's smiles faded at his tone, sensing that something was wrong. That ship of yours, Kaku began, she's gone on some really extraordinary journeys hasn't she? That's an understatement, Frankie stated. Yeah, Chopper sniffled, rubbing his arm over his blue nose sadly. Mary was the best. Yeah, you bet. Luffy agreed at once, we've done it all. A while back we flew to the sky, fell back down, we climbed a big mountain too. So, you have to work hard to fix her up extra good, okay? When he says it all like that, it makes it sound like one of Usopp's tall tales, Sanji stated. Yeah, he makes it sound like, hey. Usopp yelled at him. Kaku however hadn't said anything as he listened. Noticing this, Luffy frowned a little and asked, almost like a dare, you don't think I'm lying to you? That's not the issue, Kaku said with a slight pause. He then turned his head and finally glanced back up at them as he informed them. Her battle scars are far worse than you think. Then you're saying it's gonna take a long time for you to fix her? Memory Nami asked, sounding a little surprised at that. They all braced themselves for the blow that was about to come. No, ma'am, Kaku said bluntly, it's not about the time, it's not about skill either. I'm saying no one can fix her, not even us. Oh, why don't you just rip out my heart, why don't ya? Exclamation mark quote. Usopp yelled out tearfully, tears falling as Chopper cried out in pain, hugging him tightly. For him, it was like hearing that his mother was sick all over again and that she would soon die. He wanted to run around and tell lies again, to find some way to keep her spirits up and get her well. But like back then, there wasn't anything he could do. Everyone felt as if they had just been slapped in the face. They all knew the truth, they had known for a long time now. But it was still difficult to hear it all over again, thinking about the Mary giving her last for them, and now knowing that there wasn't anything they could do to help her was difficult to bear. Both Luffy and past Nami looked like how they felt, so convinced that they were finally about to get their ship fixed up, only to be told that it was already too late. I'm sorry guys, Frankie sighed. Wish there was something I could do to change it. But I doubt even Tom could have saved her. It's like hearing a friend of yours is dying, Nami sighed miserably. It's so sad, Robin sighed. She hadn't known that there was anything seriously wrong with the Mary until after they rescued her from Eni's lobby. She couldn't help but wonder if that was better or not, but the shock of seeing her suddenly break apart was terrible to behold. Not even she could hold back the tears of gratitude for all Mary sacrificed for her and the others. Polly came over to sit down on the timber as well before he puffed on his cigar and asked them, so that means that the keel was damaged, huh? That's right, Kaku answered. It looks like it's taken a real wallop. Wallop. That's putting it lightly, Frankie couldn't help but add. She had a thrashing. No way, Memory Nami gasped out, stepping forward before she explained, we've gone everywhere without any problems up until now. I wouldn't say that, Usopp sighed as he sat down again, remembering all the hard work that they had to put in on a daily basis to keep her floating. It just wasn't until they reached Water 7 did the Mary truly begin to fall apart. In theory, Kaku went on, even if we did everything we could, the probability of your ship lasting till the next island is 0. Luffy looked at them in pure disbelief, staring at them as if he couldn't believe what he was saying. I can't stand it, Chopper yelled out. Mary was so strong. Her spirit may have been, but her body wasn't, Frankie told them grimly. But we came all the way from the East Blue with her, it was just hard to imagine her sinking after all we went through, Sanji sighed. But that's the whole problem, Zoro stated as Frankie nodded beside him. I told you this before, remember? Humans have the ability to heal and grow stronger. But a ship can't do that on its own. New wounds pile on top of the old ones until it just can't go any farther. Sunny is an amazing ship, but the Mary was one of a kind, Robin said sadly. We just pushed her too hard, Usopp said, choking back the tears. What? You can't fix the Going Mary? Luffy cried out, clearly not wanting to believe it. Why not? I thought all of you were supposed to be awesome shipwrights. He smacked one of the cases and told them, don't worry about the money. Look, we got plenty. It's not about the money, son, Kaku informed him. No matter how much you pay, that ship can't be restored to how she used to be. If the keel was still in one piece, maybe she could have been saved, Frankie stated, but it was cracked right down the middle. That's like breaking someone's spine right in half, they may live but they're suffering, unable to go anywhere. Don't say that, Brooks said, feeling terrible about all this. Luffy and Nami were both looking heartbroken at the news. To be honest, I'm rather impressed you were able to get that old girl this far, Kaku stated, a little bit of an impressed tone coming through on his voice, considering the condition that she's currently in. What is that supposed to mean? Memory Nami demanded hotly. What exactly is going on with the Mary? Do you know what the keel is, a moral girl? Polly asked the navigator. What did he say? Sanji snarled. Sanji, it's not important, Nami told him. Amor. Her past self began hotly before she asked, the thing on the bottom of the boat. Yeah, Polly confirmed, breathing out some smoke, it's the most important part of lumber on a ship. It crosses from stern to bow, and provides support. When you build a ship, you start off by placing the keel. Then you set the wood for the steam, the stern, the frame brackets and deck beams. All of the pieces are carefully assembled together with the keel serving as the core. It's the very backbone, framework, and life of every vessel constructed. And when it's severely damaged, then that's the end of it. You can't just replace it with a new one. That'd be the same thing as building a new ship from scratch. Then couldn't they have done that? Chopper asked wonderingly. Nope, Frankie muttered. Each ship is one of a kind. You can't create another Mary any more than someone can make two of a person. That's the reason we, or anyone, won't be able to fix her. Polly finished up dismally. Your ship is just a bunch of wood stuck together, awaiting her end. You don't have to say it like that, Brook said, his voice hard. No one was happy to hear it, not just because they were saying that their ship was done for, but because how they said it. Like they thought she wasn't worth crying over. Hey, you, don't say just horrible things. Past Nami yelled out, obviously feeling the same way that they all were. Luffy, however, didn't say anything as he just looked at them, as if trying to hold back what he really thought of their assessment. Horrible or not, it's the truth, Polly said indifferently, and they all glared at him. Okay, fine then. Luffy yelled at them. Just rebuild her from the ground up like you said before. Build another Going Mary. Easier said than done, bro, Frankie sighed. Coo. Sorry. Not possible, Lucci's pigeon said. Why not? Luffy asked in frustration. We could build you a very similar ship, the pigeon explained, holding up his wings like hands. But no one can build you one that's exactly the same. Nowhere in the world are there two completely identical ships. It simply can't be done. Why is that? Usopp demanded Frankie, but Memory Nami, who looked lost as to who she should be looking at, Lucci or the pigeon, asked the same thing. What do you mean? Why? Tell me, are there any two trees in the world that grow exactly the same way? Hattori asked them, and she blinked as she thought that over, everyone knowing the answer there. And that's the reason why you can't, Frankie sighed. Sorry bro, but even though some of Galila were undercover assassins, they knew what they were talking about. If there was anything that could be done about Mary, they'd at least try. A sailing ship is mostly built out of lumber, Hattori went on. So the overall size and shape of a vessel is determined by the type of wood used. That's why a complete duplicate of your ship can't be built by us or anyone. Even when using the same blueprints. If we made a ship like that with those specifications, the ones who would notice the difference and feel like it's a completely different ship, would be all of you guys. Unfortunately, he's completely right, Frankie muttered. It would be like a complete stranger wearing a mask that looked like the face of your friend. You'd know right off the bat that it was someone else. Gloomy way to put it, Sanji sighed. Just trying to make sure you all understand, he said, look, after seeing everything you went through with her, I understand how you feel. But, it's alright Frankie, Zoro stated, we all get it. Even if we don't like to talk about it. Excuse me, Brook said softly, but, the way you all talk about Lam Chan, it's like she's alive in some sort of way. Well, Nami said slowly, the truth is. But at that moment, Memory Nami's hands curled into fists. No way, she said, sounding like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. So you're saying it's absolutely impossible for us to continue sailing on the Going Mary? That's exactly what he means, Sanji sighed. What an asshole. Unfortunately, yes, Kaku confessed, you can either wait around for her to sink, or, you can dismantle her immediately. What would have been better? Chopper sniffled, looking up at Frankie in confusion. Hard to say in Mary's case, Frankie answered him gently. She was different alright, but she sure must have been suffering by forcing her body to keep going in the shape that she was in. She'd pushed herself beyond her limits by the time we escaped Eni's lobby. She just couldn't go any farther. You gave her a real burial at sea, and that was probably the best choice for her. Burial at sea, Brook repeated. Luffy however was still glaring at the shipwrights as Iceberg told them that it sounded like the Mary was on her last legs. But if they had so much money, they couldn't ask for a better opportunity to get a new ship. They were in the best place in the world for a new model. To be fair, Robin stated, noticing how angry they all looked, furious at how cold he said that. I'm sure he didn't know how special Mary was. If he had, he wouldn't say something like that. Doesn't mean I have to like it, Usopp muttered bitterly as Chopper took the tissue from Frankie so that he could blow his nose. It's his job, Frankie stated with a sigh, wishing he had another cola. This part of a shipwright's job is never fun. But that's the life of a ship. I understand your ship was a Carvel, Iceberg informed them. So sailing on the Grand Line with an old ship like that would have been difficult to begin with. No way, Luffy said firmly, we're not getting a new ship. Usopp stared at him as Memory Nami whispered his name. But Luffy had already got one talking. The Mary is, he paused for a moment before he looked up and proclaimed loudly, the Going Mary is the ship of the Straw Hat Pirates. If she's repaired, she can still sail. Usopp felt as though he had just been slugged in the face with those words. Did he say the exact same thing as well? At the time he was just so angry and full of self-pity he didn't once stop to think how hard it had been for Luffy to hear these words. And his feelings of shame only got worse when Luffy went on. She'll be fine, you'll see, she got us here today didn't she? He asked, and you tell us out of nowhere she can't sail anymore. I can't believe that. I won't. You guys are saying that cause you don't know her. You have no idea how strong she is. Yeah, Luffy. Chopper cheered on, but they all knew that Luffy was in denial about the whole thing. It hasn't fully sunk in just yet. Iceberg just looked at him. Then your plan is to just keep sailing her until she sinks? He asked as Memory Nami looked surprised by the coldness in his voice. I'm shocked. So, this is a decision of the ship's captain. Luffy looked startled that he would ask something like that, now shaking and looking confused as to what to do. You know, he made the right choice in the end, Frankie stated. He was the one who decided to get a new ship right. Yeah, Nami nodded, looking back at the scene. It must have been a really hard choice, but I guess he must have thought long and hard about what Iceberg said here. It's not always easy being captain, Zoro shrugged. But the captain is the one who has to make the real decisions, no matter how hard they are. Usopp looked like he wanted to go crawling under a rock or something from hearing these words. He wanted to cover his ears and turn his eyes away, but it was like an addiction, he just couldn't stop watching. Iceberg sighed and shut his eyes. This discussion is over for now, he told them, just think about it. If you decide to buy a ship, let me know, my people can help. He looked back up, if you're able to spend 300 million we can build you a state-of-the-art ship. He turned to Khalifa, who handed him a catalog of all their used and new models to use as a price reference. Luffy was still looking lost as to what to do as Nami took it miserably. She was just telling Luffy that they should head back to the ship and tell everyone the bad news when someone came walking over towards them. A muscular man with black hair, a mustache, and thick sunglasses came walking towards him. His chest was covered with intricate tattoos, and on his head, there was a part of his hair that stuck up like a spike. Peeply Lulu, Frankie said, recognizing him. Strange name, Sanji couldn't help but mutter. That's nothing, Frankie muttered, some of the guys have even weirder names than that. Lulu however called to Iceberg, there's someone at the front gate who wants to see you. Iceberg looked to Khalifa who looked at her notes. There doesn't appear to be anyone on your appointment scheduled for today, she said in surprise. It looks like those world government officials again, Lulu said. Should I tell them you're unavailable? The government, sticking their noses in places where they don't belong again, Frankie muttered and Robin nodded dully by his side. You both should probably get out of here then, Brooke said in worry, if the government finds out that you were here, then there's a chance that everyone could get in trouble. Really? How? Chopper asked. Use your head, Usopp sighed. They'd love a chance to arrest pirates with such a high bounty. And Galila would get in trouble for trying to deal with pirates. It was best that we get out of there. Well, he was already long gone by this point wasn't he? He looked down at his lap with shame covering him like a dark cloud. Iceberg nodded, telling Lulu to tell them that he wasn't here, but it was too late for several men in suits were heading towards them. Polly warned Luffy and Nami to hide, and they went behind the large stack of lumber as they heard them all talk. What worried them all was the fact that the middleman claimed that he could smell pirates around, but told him that wasn't important, he just wanted to talk to him. He can smell pirates? Chopper asked in surprise. Well, most pirates don't bother to bath more than a week, Nami sighed, knowing how smelly the boys can get. It was funny watching Iceberg acting like a child, telling him to go away as he picked his nose. In the end, he walked away with the government men however, leaving the other shipwrights talking with each other. They moved back to Luffy and Nami, who was muttering to Luffy that they should leave now before they're spotted. But when Luffy didn't answer, she looked back to see that he was frowning heavily at the two cases he grabbed. What? Hissed past Nami, what's wrong? Something seemed weird about these bags when I grabbed them, Luffy said as he lifted one of the cases and looked at her. They're really light. How could they be light when? Brook began before he remembered what Usopp said about them being robbed. Oh is right, Usopp whimpered. It was all my fault I know it. Usopp, Chopper gulped, hoping that he wouldn't get angry like how he did before. Huh, what do you mean? Memory Nami asked him, putting on a fake smile. Oh, come on, stop kidding around, how could they be with all that money inside? As if to prove her point, she took her case and weighed one of Luffy's cases in her hands. But then she stopped and stared at them as if she realized that he was right, Luffy's case seemed to be much lighter. They took the two cases and opened them, they only peeked inside them before they screamed. They screamed so loud that it seemed to shake the entire shipyard and all the shipwrights were turned in their direction, startled. I guess you found out the money was gone? Zoro asked coolly. No, we were just screaming for the fun of it. Nami snapped at him sarcastically. You idiots, Polly yelled as he walked around to glare at them. What the hell are you? His eyes widened and he turned red when he saw how Nami was sitting on the ground. Hey lady, how dare you sit like that? As if he only thought of it, Sanji and Brook stepped ahead only for Nami to hit them again, wondering just how long it was going to take for them to learn their lesson. Her past self completely ignored Polly as she crawled over to the two bags, almost afraid if she spoke too loudly, it would make it true. Don't tell me, there's no way. I don't wanna look. Luffy also stuttered, but they looked anyway. Though the outsides were glossy and looked new, the insides were all patched and sewed together, and most importantly, they were empty. 200 million. Luffy yelled. Gone. It's really gone. Memory Nami screamed. Wait, look at these bags. They aren't even ours. This is so embarrassing to watch. The current Nami sighed as they watched, both of them yelling and asking what they were supposed to do. Hey, keep it down, Hattori said as Lucci came over to see what the yelling was all about. What's wrong? You both look like you've seen ghosts, Brook stated, seeing how white and haunted they looked. Correction, they look like they are ghosts, Zoro added, feeling torn between amusement and frustration. Our money is gone. Luffy croaked out. Vanished, gone, disappeared. Past Nami whimpered, sounding close to tears. Polly looked alarmed at that and asked what they were talking about. Hattori looked at him and asked, Polly, was it you again? Huh, no, Polly yelled back at him. Honest, Hattori pressed him. If I didn't know what happened, I'd probably think it was him too, Sanji declared. He sure didn't do himself any favors when he tried to take it before. Robin chuckled a little. Why would I lie? Polly demanded. You mean it? Hattori again. And soon they had gotten into a slight argument as Lulu asked Kaku what he was doing with the Frankie family. Kaku looked confused at the question, claiming that he hadn't been anywhere near the Frankie family all day. Lulu seemed baffled too as he mentioned that he could have sworn that he saw his long nose. And this is where things get messy, Zoro said knowingly, and Frankie was looking embarrassed. But hey, how was he supposed to know that he had robbed his future captain and crew? If he had known just how much trouble they went through to get that money, he never would have touched it. But hey, if that didn't steal it, Sunny wouldn't be here now, right? He hoped they remembered that before they try and kill him. But at the words, long nose, Luffy and Nami both stuck their heads around the corner to stare at him. Whoa. Hold on a sec, Memory Nami yelled, running out and asking what he was talking about. Lulu looked surprised by their sudden interest and said, just outside the gate I saw someone who looked like Kaku with the Frankie family. They had 4 cases with them, but they left 2 of them behind. And the guy with them looked like he was about to cry. That's Usopp, Luffy exclaimed, and Usopp lowered his head, a dark cloud now really over his head. Really, Luffy? He whimpered, you knew it was me because I was crying. You saw him with the Frankie family. Memory Nami yelled at them. Well, you could say he was with them, Lulu admitted, and Brook was startled to see when he pushed the spike of hair into his head to get it to behave, it ended up being pushed out in his mustache. Or maybe you could say they were dragging him away. That's called kidnapping, past Nami yelled at him. Really, what did he think was happening? The current Nami sighed before her past self turned to Luffy, telling him they had to find him. But Luffy had already took off so fast that he was leaving a cloud of dust behind him. Frankie, Sanji asked, I hope that you don't mind what you're gonna see. No, Frankie stated, though I can't say I'm happy over what you did to my boys in my house. At the same time, I don't blame you for doing what you did. What happened? Brook began, and even Robin looked confused. Though they both had a very good idea to what they must have done. Frankie here stole our 200 million berries and beat up Usopp, Nami stated as the memory faded around them, and the boys here ended up beating up the rest of the Frankie family and blew up their house. So I say we're even, Zoro said. Not the best way to get to know your future shipwright, Brook said in surprise. How did you all become such good friends after that? That's a good question, Usopp said, I wondered that as well. Usopp-san, Brook said softly, knowing that he must have felt so guilty over letting the money get stolen on his watch. Just what happened to you, Usopp? Robin asked in concern, and Usopp sighed miserably. I wandered off looking at the cannons, he said. I lost track of Luffy, and all I remember for sure was being grabbed from behind and dragged out of the shipyard. He gulped, they beat me up and left me in the backstreets as they took the money. He looked away, humiliation filling his entire insides. They had trusted him to guard the money, and he couldn't even do that much. He wasn't as strong as they were, even Nami could hold her own in a fight, but he couldn't even fight some weirdos dressed like perverts. How pathetic was that? He wanted to curl up and shrivel away to nothing. It only made him feel all the more selfish when he felt Nami's comforting hands on his shoulders and Chopper coming over to hug him. He didn't feel like he deserved their support. He was about to tell them not to bother when the memory came back and they were in the backstreets. Zoro, Sanji, and Chopper were all there as Sanji heaved Luffy out of the water. What happened? Brook asked in surprise. After leaving the shipyard, Nami sighed, I found Usopp around here. She looked around and saw that Usopp really wasn't here anymore. He was beaten pretty badly, so I didn't think it was safe to move him. So I ended up leaving, telling him that I'd be back with help. She got back to the ship and told us what happened, Sanji added, but when we got here, Usopp was already gone, and Luffy fell from the sky. From the sky? Robin asked. But where were you, Usopp-san? Brook asked as Usopp sighed again. I was so ashamed, he admitted, remembering the words he choked out to Nami. I felt that, I had to get the money back myself. Otherwise I never would have been able to look at everyone again. Would you stop complaining about it? Zoro asked, though there was a hint of sympathy in his voice. Yeah, that's all over now, right? Chopper asked quickly, it doesn't matter. Luffy was now coughing and spurting up water as Sanji and Chopper knelt with him as he tried to breathe. What were you doing? Memory, Sanji asked, and where the hell did you fall from? The shipyard, Luffy wheezed. I was trying to jump around like that carpenter to look for Usopp. I remember that, Nami hissed, thinking back to how Luffy insisted on jumping around the buildings when all of Water 7 was after them. That moron almost gave her a heart attack. What was he thinking? Just because some powered-up shipwright could do it, he could too. He just didn't get it. Are you alright? Past Chopper asked in concern. Yeah, he gasped before he remembered what was going on and looked up. Oh, that's right. I almost forgot. We've got a terrible problem. Usopp was abducted and so was the money. We know, Past Sanji said seriously, that's why we're here. Come on, we were just about to head over to the hideout of the guys who did it. I bet that's where we'll find Usopp, and the money. Well, we found Usopp, Chopper said, looking at him sadly as his friend sighed again. Why do I get the feeling that something really bad happened and it had nothing to do with the money? Brook asked them, seeing how upset they all were. This couldn't be just about a theft, could it? They all seemed more upset than that, and they weren't telling Frankie off for it either. So if it wasn't about the money, then why were they all like this? The bad thing happened after we got Usopp back, Zoro whispered to him. But don't ask why, I'm sure that we're bound to see it all over again. Let's just say that, it was a sad day for everyone. Brook looked confused, but fell silent as Luffy's eyes narrowed dangerously in memory. Sanji finished, getting up to his feet. Maybe he felt responsible for what happened and went to settle the matter with the Frankie family on his own. Which was stupid, Nami hissed to him, pulling their Usopp's nose so that he got back to his feet and they were able to follow after the four of them. What made you think you had to get it back on your own? It was my fault and you know it. He retorted, I had to do something. And risk your life over some money. She demanded, you were a tangled mess when we found you. You should have just waited for everyone to find you before going to the Frankie house and getting the snot beaten out of you. Where were you anyway, Nami? Robin asked curiously and Nami let go of Usopp's nose and he cried out in pain as they went after the boys, heading to where Frankie's hideout was. I was back at the Mary, she confessed. If I went marching in with everyone, I'd just be in the way. I had to stay on the Mary, guard the ship and our 100 million. That was what I needed to do. Yeah, and as soon as we got back, she almost shot at us, Zoro reminded her. I said I was sorry. She retorted, you just jumped on board and I was expecting someone to come and attack me. You should have given me a heads up. Besides, I missed you, didn't I? That's hardly the point here. He yelled. Shut up, Moss Head. Sanji snapped, Nami had good reason to fire. And if she really hit you, would it have been that bad? I should kill you for that, Zoro snarled at him as they kept going. They argued and fought the whole way until they were out of town and back near another cape, not unlike the one where they docked the Mary. They only had to travel a couple miles before they found it, and as soon as they spotted it, there was no doubt who it belonged to. Sitting on the cove, there was a large, colorful house. The front held the words, Frankie House, in giant golden letters, and there were large, robot-like, arms hanging off the sides that reminded them all of a workshop. But the four past Straw Hats weren't even looking at it, all of them were gathered around something laying on the ground. When they approached, some of them gasped. It was Usopp. His body was all mangled and twisted. He was covered with bruises, cuts, and his face was dripping blood. He looked like a pretzel all twisted up, but the worst part was seeing the dust imprints of footprints covering his body, as if he had been used as a doormat and the dried tears that made tracks down his face. Seeing himself like that, Usopp felt that he was being stepped on all over again. This was worse than he remembered. Everyone just stared down at him. The three who had found him like this didn't move at all, but Brook's jaw was open in shock as Nami seemed to be fighting the tears. Were you and your men trying to kill him? Nami screamed at Frankie, who flinched at what she said. All right, we went too far. He yelled back, really. He looked to Usopp and added in a soft mumble, sorry, really sorry for this, bro. Usopp could only bring himself to nod. This all happened years ago, but seeing it all firsthand like this again, just brought back all those bad feelings. But Nami was now yelling at him, you really are an idiot, aren't you? What were you thinking charging in there without any backup? I just wanted to make things right, he said angrily, looking away, unable to meet her eyes. But everyone's anger seemed to disappear as they watched him. Luffy's voice sounded almost far away to him, but he listened anyway, asking Chopper if he was still breathing. Memory Chopper was examining Usopp, turning his body over very gently so that he could see him. He's unconscious, but, he began, sounding close to crying, yes, he's breathing. He'll live, I can still save him. You were beaten almost as bad as you got back in Alabasta, Chopper informed him. And I wasn't hit with a 4-ton bat either, Usopp said with a shake of the head. Once he heard that Usopp would live, Luffy lowered his hat down so that they couldn't see his eyes. He then said softly, you wait out here for us, okay Usopp? Not like I could do anything else, Usopp sighed. But now things are gonna get bad aren't they? Robin asked them knowingly. Like we were gonna let them get away with something like this. Zoro asked darkly. Not in hell. Everyone seemed to ready themselves for what they were gonna do. Sanji just lit up another cigarette as Zoro tied his bandana over his head. You could almost see the steam coming out of Chopper's nose. And though Luffy's face was oddly blank, there was a deep anger emanating from his body. And if there was one thing they knew, it was when you couldn't see Luffy's eyes before a fight, shit was about to go down. Walking side by side, they headed to the house with another word. We're going to level that stupid house to the ground, Luffy promised, and they all slowly walked, and the closer they got, they could hear the sounds of laughter and partying going on inside the building. Frankie knew that they had every reason to, but it was still gonna be hard to see his family beaten and his home destroyed. He just hoped that they get it over with quickly. Alright boys, it's time to kick their asses, all of them. Nami cheered them on. You know, Robin reminded her, we're all allies now aren't we? I know that, Nami answered quickly, blushing a little, I just, got caught up in the moment you know. They stood out the front door for only a short minute. Just then, the door opened and a large man had appeared, with his head turned over his shoulder and seemed to be laughing at someone. He turned, ready to leave until he looked down and spotted them all there. He looked baffled, but Luffy had already stretched his arm out and took him out with a single punch, sending him flying back and breaking the door clean off its hinges. At the sound, all the other members stopped partying and were freaking out at what was going on. What was that? What happened? Who the hell are those guys? You jerks. You got a death wish. Bet they didn't see that coming, Robin offered conversationally. The four of them just stood in the doorway and glared at every single one of them. It was clear that this was no longer about the money, they had just made this little grudge personal. All the members of the Frankie family had been enjoying themselves, there was booze and cards laying all over the place, but they were now staring at who came knocking with terror on their faces and they gulped. I recognize them. The one of them shouted, pointing at Luffy, it's that pirate, Straw Hat Luffy. So you came to get your money back did ya? One of the largest guys said, marching forward, and slipping armor around his upper half. Bad move. Just take a look around you. You really think the four of you are enough to handle all of us? Ha, 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 but since you're here, might as well take those big bounties on your heads. Wow, he's big, Brooke said, looking up at him. Though nowhere near as big as the giants Dory and Reggie had been. He'd have to guess that they reach up to about half as large as them. The Kairiki destroyers. Frankie cried out overjoyed. What made them think they could take on someone with 100 million bounty in the first place? Zoro asked them. I mean, someone with that kind of bounty isn't gonna be easy. Overconfidence, Robin answered calmly. As well as the fact that Luffy doesn't look that dangerous normally. Well, they're in for a nasty surprise, Brooke pointed out for them. Oh, they were, Zoro nodded. Once everyone calmed down, they all began to smirk and already seemed to be making plans what to do with the reward money for turning them in. Zambai, Frankie said as he looked around, remembering each and every face here and his heart ached painfully. He missed them all so much. He made a note to ask Robin if she knew anything else about what was going on at Water 7 and everyone there. Now, was probably not the best time to mention it. Zambai grinned. He's the captain of that long-nosed weakling we took care of earlier. He mocked at them and Luffy's eye twitched at those words and his anger seemed to grow even more so when the others laughed. Please don't kill them, Frankie moaned out, knowing that this was gonna be painful. They were still breathing at the end of the day right? Sanji asked. Barely, Frankie growled. With that pitiful excuse for a pirate on his crew he can't possibly be that strong. Someone laughed. Actually, it's the captain who is almost always the strongest one, Robin commented, they should be much more concerned about that. The giant of the man came over, daring him to attack, which Luffy was only too happy to do so. He then began a series of quick punches much like his Gatling gun, however, it kept stopping just short of the armor. Gum, Luffy began threateningly. Whata think you're doing? He taunted him with a laugh. Are you punching him? Another guy laughed, not even a bombardment of battleships can put a dent in that armor. Well, he can punch harder than any cannonball now can't he? Usopp asked, a part of him glad that he was gonna see them get what they had coming. Ha, what a joke. Someone sneered, but Luffy kept going, refusing to stop. The guy raised a giant axe, ready to take him out here, but at that moment, Luffy's arms and hands began to burn a red color like in his second gear form. For a moment, some of them thought that he was using his gear, but then, he finished the attack with a single double-palmed blow similar to his bazooka. A bright light bursting, burning hot, and blasting through the armor with a giant hole. Cannon! Luffy screamed out as his opponent was sent flying back, a giant hole in the armor. For a moment no one moved, but then the Frankie family began to scream in panic as they stared at their friend on the ground. He punched a hole right through it. Someone yelled, but Luffy didn't have any trace of enjoyment on his face. He was pissed off and he was going to make sure that these guys pay for it. I almost feel bad at them now, Chopper said as they watched how scared they were. We didn't give them anything they didn't deserve, Zoro shrugged. Zanbai held his hands out in what looked like surrender. Hey, hold on. Just wait a second guys. Let's talk about this first. Okay, guys. But then he turned to the others who had their cannons out. Okay guys. Fire the cannons. That was a low tactic, Frankie said, shaking his head in disappointment. His men then fired their cannons at him, but Zoro was the one who ran ahead. Now, three-sword style, Karasuma, he cried out before sticking the sword in his mouth. He cut through each one of the cannonballs and finished, Raven Hunt. And as he seemed to hover in the air, the cannon split clean in half and exploded safely away from the others behind him. The Frankie family screamed in terror as Zoro looked up at them dangerously, looking like some sort of demon. If that doesn't scare them, I don't know what will, Zoro sneered proudly as he watched them. What? Zanbai screamed, his eyes practically popping out of his head. Impossible. Those cannonballs are made of iron. As if he wanted to prove a point, Memory Zoro went and sliced through one of their cannons clean in half, and scared them worse than ever. Holy crap, someone screamed, these guys are seriously bad news. Should have thought of that before they decided to pick a fight to us, Nami said smugly. Let's get out of here. Everyone run for the back door. Another yelled, but as they tried to run, Sanji jumped over them, doing a one-hand stand on one guy's face. You guys started this fight, his past self said darkly, it's kinda pathetic to run from it like cowards. Really, if they wanna fight so badly, then stick around, the current Sanji said, don't run when you realize that you're no match. That only proves that you're a coward and a bully. But his past self was far from over. Party table, kick course. He then spun around rapidly to deliver a savage kick to the face of anyone within range. After he ran out of targets, he jumped down and kicked the poor guy he was spinning on so hard that he went flying. Now the rest of the Frankie family were getting ready to do just about anything to get out now. But through all the smoke, Memory Chopper was there to stop them from jumping through the windows. He had swallowed a rumble ball and went into Horn Point before he charged ahead. Roseo Coronado. He cried and he chased them all down, tossing them all up in the air with his horns, and to see them land on their heads, embedded in the ground with their bodies sticking straight up out of the ground and their bodies sticking straight up like a column. No one could say anything as they watched this one-sided beatdown going on. Frankie wanted to beat them up for seeing how they were pounding the snot out of his men, but he just couldn't bring himself to get angry either. This was torture. Wait, Zanbai cried out, trying to stop the destruction, only now he didn't have any cannons to back him up. He was close to crying here as he begged, you guys. It's the money, right? You just want the money back. The 200 million that long-nosed guy had. They just keep digging their own graves now, don't they? Sanji sighed. You'd think they'd realize that this wasn't about the money anymore, right? Luffy's eye twitched once again when they mentioned Usopp. Is that right? I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but that pile of money isn't here anymore. Zanbai shouted, a smile coming back to his face. Frankie, the family boss, took it all and went on a shopping spree. And since he's buying something on the black market, we don't have any idea where he is or even how to find him. Well, I wasn't on the island at this point, Frankie said. I went to somewhere else with Kiwi and Mozu, my little sisters, he added to Brook's confused look, and getting something I had wanted for as long as I can remember. But before Brook could ask him what it was, Zanbai went on, so no matter how much of a rampage you go on, that 200 million won't be coming back. So why don't you just go on in? But Luffy heard enough. He punched him, sent him flying back and crashing into the wall. Zanbai. One of them yelled in fear. But they were far from done. Shut up. That's enough out of you, Memory, Sanji snarled. This has nothing to do with the money. Usopp blinked at that in confusion, his breath got caught in his throat as he slowly began to realize what they were talking about. They weren't doing this to get the money back, they were doing it because they were angry at the Frankie family for what they did to him. He had to fight back the tears that were threatening to come at that. That these guys were willing to fight for him even after he screwed up so badly. How could he bear to face what he said to Luffy after all this? Damn straight, past Zoro added. It's too late for that. Not even your asses will be left when we're done, Luffy said, darkly cracking his knuckles as he glared at them with disdain. We're gonna leave no bone unbroken. It was all over at those words. The Frankie family panicked worse than ever as they pulled out a giant cannon, the fire anything ya got cannon. But nothing they fired out of it, which consisted with everything from clothes to a kitchen sink, worked against them. They were easily able to dodge every attack they had to throw at them before they gave them the beating of a lifetime. None of the men were killed, but it was a close call. Like Luffy had said, no one seemed willing to leave until they broke each and every bone they could get their hands on. Some of the current Straw Hats flinched in pain after seeing some of the blows against them. But everyone was glad to see that it ended quickly, though Frankie moaned out at seeing how they ended up blowing up the house, and his men all laying on the ground beaten and bloodied. Why? He asked them. Why? Like I said, Zoro said, we're even now, don't you think? You beat them all up and destroyed our house. He yelled at them. And you beat up our friend and took more than half our money, Sanji reminded him. Please, Robin sighed, isn't the fighting over yet? Sorry, the boys all said to her, like a bunch of boys fighting over a game, and their mother came in to break them up. Among the smoking wreckage of the lay-all of the Frankie family, Sanji and Zoro sat there, both of them looking bored, but their anger seemed to have mostly disappeared as Chopper went back to Usopp and began to treat him. You know, Frankie said sourly, when I was getting on the train, I heard an explosion coming from my pad. I just didn't know that this is what happened. So you did hear us? Sanji asked in a bored way. I just thought that they were getting carried away with their party, Frankie hissed, a muscle going in his head. But when I got back, I thought I was dreaming at first. This is what happens when you mess with one of us, Nami said as she continued to pat Usopp on the shoulder, who sighed again. With their anger spent, they were all talking about what they should do. Luffy didn't join in their talk as he jumped up higher on the burnt crescent moon that had once hung on the outside of the house, and looked out at the sea, as if lost in thought. Memory Sanji kicked at a piece of shrapnel near his feet and asked stiffly, should we go after Frankie? And start looking where? Past Zoro asked him dully as he retired his bandana around his arm. Yeah, by this point I was already long gone, Frankie told them all. Aw man, looks like these idiots really didn't know where he took the money, Past Sanji spat as he glanced with antipathy down at some of the men. They all followed his gaze to where Chopper was still bandaging Usopp up. And if we do find him, if he spent it, then there's no getting it back. Nope, Frankie said happily. Shut up, Usopp and Nami both yelled at him. Memory Zoro was looking up to where Luffy was standing and asking, what now? Even if we wait around for him, he may not be back for quite a while. But Memory Chopper was yelling at them that he had finished the first aid treatment for Usopp, but he needed help to carry him back to the ship. Sanji and Zoro both got up saying that sticking around this dump wouldn't help matters anymore. Sanji added that they left Nami alone at the ship and they still didn't know where Robin was, as well as the whole matter with the ship. Past Sanji then turned back to Luffy and called to him, hey, Luffy. Luffy just continued to stand there for a short time as if coming to a painful choice. Luffy-san, Brook asked worriedly. Without turning to look at them, he said, I've made a decision. Both Sanji and Zoro looked at him curiously, wondering what he was talking about. About the ship, he added after a slight pause, it's time we part ways with the Mary. We'll say goodbye to her here.